Paris, October 13, 1307. The city still sleeps beneath a veil of mist when the first torches begin to flicker through the narrow streets. Horses snort and clatter on the cobblestones, their riders wrapped in the colors of the king. Orders have been given in secret, sealed with the royal crest. Across France, before dawn breaks, every knight of the temple is to be seized, alive if possible. The sound of iron against wood echoes through the alleys as doors are broken, gates smashed, prayers cut short. Within hours, an entire brotherhood vanishes into chains. The temple itself, the great fortress of the order in the heart of Paris, looms over the river like a silent cathedral of war. Behind its stone walls, the Knights Templar had once kept treasures, archives, and relics gathered from a century of crusades. Tonight, the same walls are ringed with soldiers. Inside, torches flare as guards drag men from their cells and cloisters. The Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, is woken from his cell, pulled roughly to his feet. He had gone to bed a free man. He wakes as a prisoner of the crown. His beard is streaked with white. His eyes still hold the calm of prayer, but his lips tremble as he demands to know the charge. Heresy, the guards say. Blasphemy. Worship of false idols. He laughs once, softly, and then falls silent. By sunrise, smoke rises from the chimneys of Paris, mingling with the fog. More than 2,000 men, once the most feared and honored warriors in Christendom, are being interrogated in the city's dungeons. The Pope's name is invoked, the king's authority absolute. Yet even as the scribes record confessions won through pain, rumors ripple through the streets. Some say the Templars were caught mid-ritual, gathered before a head made of silver. Others whisper that the order had been preparing for flight, their ships loaded and waiting at La Rochelle. The truth, whatever it is, has been drowned beneath the roar of fire and the scrape of chains. In a narrow courtyard near the Seine, the Grand Master is brought before a tribunal of priests and soldiers. They accuse him of denying Christ, of spitting upon the cross, of consorting with demons. His hands, bound and bruised, do not tremble as he answers. If we are guilty, he says, then let God judge us, not the envy of men. His words are recorded and sealed, and later that night, they will be read aloud in the king's private chambers. Philip the Fair listens in silence. His eyes are hard, his debts vast. To him, this is not a trial, it is an erasure. The gold of the temple will soon be his. Days pass. The arrests spread across Europe like a plague. From France to England, from Aragon to Cyprus, Templar commanderies are stripped, their banners torn down. In every hall where the Red Cross once hung, only dust remains. But the deeper mystery grows. If this was only about gold, why the secrecy? Why the haste, the fear? The chroniclers will later write that King Philip had been warned. The Templars were planning something. A gathering, perhaps. A rite of secrecy that was to take place before the feast of St. Denis. Others will claim that in the final months before the purge, the order had begun excavating beneath their stronghold, digging deep into the ancient bedrock. No one knows what they sought there, only that they worked by night, and that their labor ceased abruptly days before the arrests. Winter comes. The cells grow colder. One by one, the accused are brought to the stake. On March 18, 1314, after 7 years of imprisonment and torture, Jacques de Molay is led to the Isle de la Cite. The sky is low and gray. He is an old man now, but he walks upright, unchained. Around him, the crowd murmurs prayers and curses alike. He stands before the pyre, raises his hands, and declares his innocence. His voice carries across the river. God knows who is wrong and who has sinned. Woe to those who judge unjustly. The flames rise. Witnesses later swear that as the fire consumed him, he called down a curse upon his persecutors, that before a year had passed, both the Pope and the King would stand before the throne of God. And so it was. Yet even as de Molay's ashes scatter into the wind, the story refuses to end. Monks whisper of hidden tunnels beneath the temple. Merchants speak of ships that vanished from La Rochelle the night before the arrests. Somewhere, it is said, a small band of Templars escaped with a chest so heavy that 6 men were needed to carry it. Its contents? No one agrees. Some say gold, others relics. A few, more daring, claim it was not a treasure at all but a secret. A knowledge so dangerous that both church and crown would burn worlds to bury it. Centuries later, long after the fires have cooled, the site of the temple in Paris becomes a place of uneasy silence. The fortress is demolished, its stones scattered. But locals insist that strange sounds echo beneath the ground at night, like chanting or the low hum of wind through hollow stone. A few scholars, poring over old maps, note something curious. The vaults beneath the temple were never fully recorded. Some passages end abruptly, others vanish into blank space. Whatever was hidden there was either destroyed or sealed beyond reach. And yet, a single line from a forgotten chronicle survives. A note written by a monk in 1313, months before the final execution. The brothers prepare the vessel. It reads, "It will be hidden where the earth remembers." For centuries, historians have argued over its meaning. A metaphor, perhaps, for the faith that survives persecution. Or something more literal, a clue to a burial, a hiding place, a chamber untouched since the fall of the order. The night the Templars fell was meant to end their story, but it became the beginning of a darker one. Beneath the ashes of their faith, beneath the stone foundations of their vanished fortress, something may still wait, silent, sealed, patient. The question that haunted kings and priests alike has never been answered. What did the Templars find that made the world so desperate to forget them? The flames still whisper in the memory of Paris, though years have passed since that night of terror. The execution of Jacques de Molay was meant to extinguish the name of the Knights Templar forever. Yet his final words linger like smoke that refuses to fade. "Before the year is out," he cried from the pyre, "Pope Clement and King Philip shall answer before God." Witnesses said his voice did not tremble even as the fire reached his beard, that his eyes burned brighter than the flames themselves. Some swore that the wind carried his curse across the Seine, rattling the church windows, and that for a heartbeat, all of Paris held its breath. A month later, Pope Clement V was dead, stricken by illness, or so the records say. The following year, King Philip IV fell from his horse and died without warning. To the faithful, it was proof of divine judgment. To the fearful, it was something else entirely. A sign that the Templars had taken their secret to the grave and that heaven itself had punished those who betrayed them. The execution had not ended the story. It had ignited a legend. In the taverns and monasteries of Europe, whispers spread of the Grand Master's final vow. Some claimed that de Molay had hidden the Templar treasure before his arrest. Not gold, but something infinitely more powerful. Others spoke of a relic brought from the Holy Land, so sacred and terrible that even the Pope feared its existence. Among sailors, a rumor circulated that on the night before the mass arrests, several Templar ships left the port of La Rochelle under cover of fog. Their destination was unknown. They were never seen again. The king's men searched every coast from Normandy to Lisbon, but not a single sail was found. Yet beneath the legends, there was grief, deep, human, and unbearable. Thousands of men who had taken vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience now languished in prisons. They had fought and bled for the cross, only to be accused by the very church they had sworn to defend. Families who once honored the Red Cross began to hide their allegiance. The Templar seal, once a mark of courage, became a curse whispered behind closed doors. In remote corners of France and Aragon, surviving brothers fled to monasteries, changed their names, and vanished into anonymity. But even hidden, they remembered. They carried with them the last fragments of the order's secret teachings, lessons in geometry, astronomy, and sacred architecture learned from the East. These fragments would quietly resurface centuries later, in the cathedrals of Europe and the lore of secret societies. Still, there remained the matter of what the Templars had guarded. For 2 centuries, their order had controlled immense wealth and influence, yet much of their fortune could never be accounted for. The royal treasury seized by Philip was vast, but incomplete. Inventories made by the king's scribes show that whole sections of the temple vaults were empty when the soldiers arrived. The gold, the ledgers, even the relics catalogued by church emissaries had vanished. Where had it gone? Some believed the brothers had hidden it in their commanderies scattered across Europe. Others thought it was buried under the temple itself. A few dared to suggest that the treasure was never meant to be found, because it wasn't gold at all. Decades later, a monk in Avignon recorded an unsettling story. A dying Templar, he wrote, confessed that before their arrest, the Parisian brothers had conducted a final ceremony. In a candlelit crypt, deep beneath the temple, they gathered around a strange object, a relic wrapped in linen, said to have been brought from Jerusalem centuries earlier. The Grand Master himself was present. When asked what it was, the dying man only wept. He said it was the reason for our silence, and the light that burns without fire. He died the next morning, refusing to reveal more. If the story is true, then the Templars may have hidden something far older than Christianity itself, something unearthed during their first years in the Holy Land. For in 1129, long before their fall, the earliest Templar Knights had lived atop the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, where ancient tunnels ran beneath the ruins of Solomon's Temple. Chroniclers noted that the Knights rarely appeared above ground during those years. They were digging, searching. Some said for relics, others for wisdom. When they emerged, the Order's fortunes changed overnight. They were granted papal immunity, vast lands, and privileges that no other brotherhood possessed. What had they brought out of the earth to earn such favor? As the decades passed after their destruction, Europe began to shift. The Black Death swept across the continent, kings rose and fell, and the church itself fractured. Yet amid all this chaos, certain symbols began to appear. On cathedrals, manuscripts, and tombstones, twin pillars, circles intersected by triangles. The cross within a circle, carved faintly into stone. Scholars would later recognize them as echoes of Templar iconography, preserved by men who claimed no knowledge of their meaning. But legends endure where facts decay. Across generations, the myth of the Lost Templar secret took root. By the time of the Renaissance, poets and philosophers wrote of a light of knowledge the Templars had hidden from the world, a flame of truth buried beneath the earth. Alchemists sought it, mystics dreamed of it. And always there was the story of the curse. In every retelling, de Molay's prophecy became darker, that those who betrayed the order would suffer not only death but damnation, and that their descendants would live in fear of a truth they could never destroy. In the 18th century, long after the name of the Templars had become legend, a traveler named Etienne de Saint Clair claimed to have found a fragment of an old map in a Portuguese archive. It bore the seal of a Templar commandery and the words sub terra, templum mene. Beneath the earth, the temple remains. Scholars dismissed it as a forgery, yet something about the phrasing stirred unease. Could it be that the Templars, anticipating their fall, built another sanctuary, a place to hide what they could not protect? From that time onward, explorers, masons, and even clergy would seek evidence of a lost Templar refuge, a hidden temple buried beneath the soil of Europe, waiting to be rediscovered. None could prove it existed, but scattered across the centuries, fragments emerged. A carved stone in southern France bearing the Templar cross, a sealed vault discovered under a ruined abbey in Portugal, an inscription on an old bell in Tomar reading, "The light endures." Each clue fed the same hunger, that somewhere, the Order's secret had survived. The curse of Jacques de Molay had become legend, but its shadow stretched farther than any prophecy. The kings who burned him turned to dust, but the questions he left behind continued to burn in the minds of the curious and the faithful alike. What had the Templars sworn to protect? Why did men of such discipline and devotion choose silence in the face of death? And most haunting of all, if they truly buried something that night before their arrest, what kind of secret could demand so complete a sacrifice? The ashes of de Molay have long since mingled with the soil of Paris, but his voice still lingers in the echo of history, daring anyone brave enough to dig into the earth and uncover the truth that kings tried to erase. For the story of the Templars did not end in fire. It began there, in the ashes, in the silence, and in the promise that one day, the earth itself would give back what it was forced to hide. The parchment is fragile, its edges browned and curling like burnt leaves, It was found by accident, or so the story goes, in the back of a Portuguese maritime archive, hidden within a collection of 15th-century navigation charts. Most of the papers describe trade routes to Africa and the New World, but one bears symbols that do not belong to any known sea. Faint lines trace a landscape rather than an ocean, and in the corner, where a cartographer might sign his name, a faded red cross rests inside a circle, the mark of the temple. Below it, barely legible, a Latin inscription reads, Sub terra lucet templum. Beneath the earth, the temple shines. Dr. Elise Moreau holds the parchment under the soft glow of the archive lamp, her breath caught between disbelief and wonder. She is an archaeologist, trained to doubt before she dreams, yet the name written in the margin stops her heart for a moment. Henricus de Montfaucon, 1306, a known Templar navigator, believed to have vanished the same year King Philip ordered the arrests. If authentic, this fragment would have been drawn a year before the order fell, a map made in the shadow of its doom. But what does it chart? The lines twist inland from the western coast of France, into a region marked only with a crude sketch of a hill and a single word: silentius. Silence. Days turn into nights as Moreau pores over the map. Modern satellite images, geological surveys, medieval land records, none of them mention a hill of that name. Yet the topography roughly matches an area near Aude, in southern France, where Templar commanderies once flourished before their destruction. The coordinates align almost too neatly to dismiss. Beneath the layers of modern soil and forest might lie what Montfaucon called templum sub terra, the temple beneath the earth. For centuries, rumors of buried Templar vaults have been dismissed as fantasy, but this map feels different. It is not a legend carved into folklore, but a physical clue left by someone who lived through the Order's final days. Still, one question gnaws at her. Why would a Templar navigator draw a map to a hidden temple so far from any coastline? Unless, she reasons, the map was never meant for navigation by sea, but for pilgrimage, a path meant to be followed only by those who understood its symbols. When Moreau presents the parchment to the university's historical committee, she meets polite skepticism. The ink, they say, must be a later forgery. The location, too vague. Templar nonsense, one senior professor mutters. But she notices something they don't. Faint geometric markings near the hill's base. Triangles nested within circles, proportions matching sacred geometry used in medieval cathedrals. These are not the random doodles of a sailor. They are architectural cues, measurements of something constructed underground. She decides to verify it herself. Funding is scarce, so she turns to private sponsors, a quiet foundation known as the St. Clair Institute, which has financed other controversial digs tied to esoteric history. They agree to support her under strict confidentiality. Within months, she assembles a small team: a geophysicist, a medieval linguist, a field engineer, and a cameraman to document everything for research. Their destination is a wooded hill outside a small village near Carcassonne, a place the locals call La Colline du Silence. When she asks about the name, the innkeeper only shrugs. People say it hums at night, he tells her. Like the earth is breathing. The first survey begins at dawn. Dew still clings to the grass, and the air is heavy with the scent of pine. They set up ground-penetrating radar around the hill's base. The machine sends low pulses through the soil, translating echoes into images. At first, the results are unremarkable layers of rock, sediment, and root systems. But then, a pattern appears. A circular void nearly 30 meters beneath the surface, too symmetrical to be natural. Moreau stares at the monitor. The outline resembles an underground hall, with corridors radiating from a central chamber. The dimensions, when overlaid on Montfaucon's geometric sketch, match exactly. Excitement ripples through the team, but Moreau remains cautious. She's seen how easily nature can mimic design. Still, her instincts, and perhaps something deeper, tell her this is different. The soil samples confirm that the layers above the void were disturbed at some point in the 14th century, consistent with the era of the Templars' fall. No modern tunnels exist nearby, no mining activity ever recorded. If the void was carved by human hands, it has lain untouched for 700 years. The discovery leaks sooner than expected. A journalist from a local paper catches wind of the dig and publishes an article titled, "Archaeologists Search for Lost Templar Vault." Overnight, curiosity turns into chaos. Treasure hunters arrive with metal detectors. Conspiracy forums light up with wild claims that the team seeks the Holy Grail, that they've uncovered alien ruins, that the Vatican has already sent agents to interfere. The St. Clair Institute urges Moreau to suspend the excavation until the site can be secured. But she refuses. "If we stop now," she tells her crew, "someone else will dig, and they won't be careful." Under heavy tarps and night lamps, the team begins a careful descent. Each day, they dig deeper through clay and limestone, cataloging every shard and fragment. After weeks of grueling work, the sound of metal strikes something hollow, a slab of worked stone. They clear the debris until a massive door emerges from the earth, its surface carved with faint symbols eroded by time. A cross with flared ends, the same as on Montfaucon's map. At the base, an inscription barely visible reads, "Non omnis moriar," "I shall not wholly die." Silence falls over the group. Even the hum of the machines seems to fade. The door is sealed by a complex locking mechanism made of iron and lead, its design centuries ahead of its time. When they test the air seeping from the edges, they find it ancient and dry, undisturbed for centuries. Moreau kneels before the stone and runs her hand across the engraved cross. It is cold, almost unnaturally so, as if the temperature drops at its touch. For the first time in her career, the weight of history feels physical, pressing down from all sides. That night, as the others sleep in the field tents, she remains awake, staring at the hill illuminated by the moon. The mist rolls in from the valley, soft and silver, and for a moment she imagines the ghosts of armored riders standing watch over the dig. She thinks of Jacques de Molay, of the treasure that vanished, of the promise that the temple beneath the earth would one day be found. If Montfaucon truly left this map as a guide, then she is following in the footsteps of men who died to keep a secret safe. But what were they guarding? The next morning, before dawn, she writes a single line in her notebook, "The earth remembers." It is the same phrase found in that ancient chronicle written before the Templars' fall. Whether coincidence or design, it chills her to the bone. As the first light of day spills across the excavation site, the team prepares to unseal the stone door. Cameras hum to life. History, legend, and myth converge in a single moment. The air is cold, and no one speaks. The iron locks creak as they turn, dust falling like ash. And as the slab begins to shift, a hollow breath escapes from the dark within. A whisper from beneath the earth, waiting 7 centuries to be heard again. The story of the Knights Templar did not begin with wealth or mystery. It began with fear, raw, human fear on the blood-soaked roads of Jerusalem. In the years after the First Crusade, pilgrims flocked to the Holy Land from across Christendom. They came seeking salvation, but found only danger. Bandits roamed the deserts, raiders stalked the hills, and the road from Jaffa to the Holy City became a graveyard of the faithful. In 1119, a French knight named Hugues de Payens gathered 8 companions and took a vow before the Patriarch of Jerusalem. They would protect pilgrims traveling to the sacred sites, not for gold, but for God. They called themselves Paupers Camilitones Christi Templique Salomonicei, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. The world would come to know them as the Knights Templar. Their beginning was humble, 9 men, no wealth, no armor of their own. King Baldwin II of Jerusalem granted them quarters within the Temple Mount itself, in the ruins where Solomon's temple had once stood. They lived as monks, prayed as brothers, and fought as soldiers. Yet even then, whispers spread that their residence beneath the ancient temple was not accidental. For years, the knights rarely appeared above ground. Chroniclers noted their long absences and their strange excavations beneath the mount. What they sought there was never recorded, but when they emerged, everything changed. By 1129, the order had received official recognition from the Church. The Council of Troyes, led by Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, a man revered as the conscience of Christendom, blessed their mission. Bernard's endorsement transformed them from obscure warriors into holy champions. "They are gentler than lambs, yet fiercer than lions," he wrote, describing their discipline and their purity. From that moment, nobles across Europe rushed to join or support them. Lands, castles, and fortunes were donated in waves. The Templars became both monks and magnates, soldiers and stewards. Their rules were strict, their lives austere. They ate in silence, slept in their armor, and owned nothing personally. But as their numbers grew, so did their influence. Within decades, they controlled commanderies from the Holy Land to Scotland. They managed estates, collected rents, and established a network of fortresses that spanned continents. When crusaders needed to send money home, they entrusted it to the Templars, who devised coded letters of credit, early forms of banking that allowed safe transfer of wealth across vast distances. A pilgrim could deposit gold in Paris and withdraw it in Acre. No other institution in Europe could offer such security. Power followed faith, and faith fed power. The Templars became trusted advisors to kings, bankers to lords, and defenders of the church. Their ships sailed from the ports of La Rochelle and Marseille, carrying grain, arms, and sometimes secrets. Yet for all their public virtue, the order maintained an inner world known only to its highest ranks. Their rituals were private, their initiation oaths shrouded in mystery. New members were said to be tested in darkness, sworn to secrecy upon relics known only to the master. To their followers, these rites symbolized devotion. To their enemies, they hinted at blasphemy. Still, their courage was undeniable. On the battlefields of the Crusades, the sight of the Red Cross on a white mantle struck fear into the hearts of enemies. Chroniclers told of Templar knights charging into hopeless fights to protect retreating pilgrims or defend holy relics. They were said to fight until death, refusing ransom or surrender. In victory, they showed mercy. In defeat, they met martyrdom without fear. For nearly 2 centuries, they embodied the ideal of Christian knighthood, a brotherhood beyond the reach of earthly greed. And yet, the higher they rose, the deeper the shadows grew beneath them. Their residence beneath the Temple Mount, their sudden wealth, their silence about what they found there, all became fertile ground for rumor. Pilgrims told of strange artifacts carried secretly to Europe. One legend claimed they discovered a fragment of the true cross. Another, that they found scrolls written by Solomon himself, describing the Machina Lucas, the machine of light. Whether treasure or knowledge, whatever they uncovered in Jerusalem seemed to have altered their course forever. By the mid-13th century, the Templars were no longer merely warriors of faith. They were the guardians of Europe's gold, the lenders to its monarchs, and the custodians of secrets older than their order. They built circular churches modeled after the Holy Sepulchre, their architecture echoing sacred geometry from ancient times. In Portugal, England, and France, their fortresses followed patterns aligned with celestial constellations: Orion, the Pleiades, the Cross of the South. Was it coincidence, devotion, or something deeper? An encoded map of knowledge inherited from Jerusalem's stones? Their alliance with the papacy granted them privileges unheard of for any other brotherhood. They answered to no king, paid no taxes, and could cross borders freely. They were, in essence, a state within states. It was inevitable that envy would follow. Kings began to resent their independence, especially those who owed them fortunes. Whispers of arrogance, of secret worship, began to poison the courts. But among the Templars themselves, there were those who sensed the storm coming. The Grand Masters grew more withdrawn, their movements more secretive. They began sealing their archives, moving relics and documents across Europe as if preparing for disaster. Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master, inherited an order already strained by suspicion. He sought to reform it, to bring the Templars closer to the Church once more, but it was too late. King Philip IV's treasury was empty, his kingdom burdened by debt, and the Templars were its richest creditors. The king's hatred turned into fear, a fear that the order held not only his gold but knowledge that could undermine his throne. Thus began the slow conspiracy that would end in flame. When the Dawn raids began in 1307, many Templars were caught unprepared. But others vanished before the king's men arrived. Whole commanderies stood empty, their records burned, their vaults cleared. The French Royal Archives list dozens of chests marked with the Templar seal that were found to contain nothing but dust and straw. It was as if the order had anticipated its own destruction. Some historians believe the Templars' fleet at La Rochelle carried their most sacred possessions across the sea before the arrests. Others argue that they buried them inland, in one of their remote strongholds. Among the legends that grew after their fall, one remained consistent: the idea that the true temple of the Templars was never made of stone above the ground. It was built beneath it. Their churches, their castles, their commanderies were all connected by the same unseen design. A secret architecture meant to hide something too dangerous for the surface world. A few surviving maps, written in the coded geometry of the order, hint at these locations, hills and caverns marked by proportions rather than names. For centuries, such stories were dismissed as myth. But every myth begins with a seed of truth. Beneath the vows of poverty and obedience, beneath the gold and politics, the Templars had another mission, one whispered in the oldest fragments of their rule: ad custodiam luminis, to guard the light. Whether that light was divine wisdom, forbidden knowledge, or something that defied both, none can say. Yet it was the secret, hidden since their days under the Temple Mount, that would survive their downfall, and that would one day draw a modern seeker back to a forgotten hill in southern France, where the earth itself still remembers the touch of the temple. By the time the last echoes of the Crusades faded, the Templars had transformed from warriors of faith into something far more enigmatic. Their castles dotted Europe like constellations, each one fortified not just against armies, but against time itself. They had built more than strongholds. They had built vaults of knowledge. To those who gazed from the outside, they seemed an unshakable force of discipline and devotion. But within their stone walls, the air grew heavy with secrecy. It was said that even among the knights, few knew the true extent of what the order protected. Those chosen to guard the innermost relics took oaths that bound them beyond death itself. Some chroniclers of the age spoke of the custodes arcani, the keepers of the secret, an inner circle who vanished from record, whose names were erased from all ledgers. By the late 13th century, the world around the Templars had changed. The Holy Land was lost. Acre had fallen. Jerusalem, once their sacred purpose, was gone. Without a crusade to fight, they became relics of another age, their existence increasingly difficult to justify. In Europe, people began to whisper, "What do the Templars still guard?" Their enemies claimed they no longer served Christ, but something older. Merchants spoke of strange processions in the night, of hooded figures carrying sealed chests into underground chambers. In rural France, peasants told tales of the knights beneath the earth, who lit candles at midnight and sang in forgotten tongues. Whether superstition or truth, these stories marked the beginning of the Templars' fall from grace in the eyes of common men. Yet there were signs that the order had not lost its purpose. It had only changed its form. The fall of Jerusalem had not been the end of their mission, but the beginning of another. Certain writings, recovered centuries later from Templar properties in Cyprus and Aragon, hinted at a sacred trust that transcends land and crown. Scholars who examined the cryptic Latin phrases found references to the Light of Solomon and the word made hidden in the stone. Many dismissed these as metaphors for faith. Others, however, began to suspect they referred to something tangible, an object or knowledge unearthed beneath the Temple Mount during their earliest years. One medieval historian, William of Tyre, wrote that during their first decade in Jerusalem, the Templars delved deep where the temple once stood and found things of wondrous craft. His account was ignored by his contemporaries, yet it resurfaced in later centuries as a clue. What if the Templars' real mission had never been protection, but excavation? Their residence on the Temple Mount placed them directly above ancient catacombs, rumored to contain the treasures of Solomon, golden relics from the First Temple, sacred artifacts lost since the Babylonian exile. Modern archaeological studies suggest that tunnels beneath the mount stretch deep into layers untouched for millennia. Could it be that the Templars unearthed something that changed their understanding of faith, and perhaps humanity itself? If they did, they guarded that secret fiercely. Their growing wealth may have been a byproduct, not the purpose of their power. Money funded their silence, their independence, their freedom from the church and crown alike. They answered to no temporal ruler because they believed their true authority came from elsewhere, from something older than Rome, older than Christianity itself. Some have speculated that they discovered not gold, but knowledge, ancient texts, devices, or diagrams of forgotten sciences. The medieval church would have called such things heresy. The Templars might have called it truth. As the decades passed, their influence grew unbearable to those who ruled in shadows. The church tolerated them because of their usefulness, but kings resented them because of their immunity. In France, King Philip IV seethed. He had borrowed vast sums from the Templars to fund his wars, and their existence reminded him of his debt. But there was more than money at play. Philip's spies reported strange rites among the order. Initiation ceremonies where novices were blindfolded, kissed on the mouth, and told to renounce the cross. Witnesses claimed they worshipped a head, an idol named Baphomet. Historians now believe these confessions were tortured fabrications. Yet the imagery lingers. Why such specific symbols? Why the head, why the light, why the secrecy? Some modern researchers suggest that the Templar idol might not have been demonic at all, but symbolic, a relic, perhaps, of John the Baptist, whose severed head was revered as a holy object in certain regions. Others connect the term Baphomet to Muhammad, an old French corruption of Muhammad, implying that the Knights might have absorbed Sufi or Islamic mystical ideas during their time in the East. Still others, delving deeper, argue that Baphomet derives from Baphi Métis, Greek for baptism of wisdom. If true, the idol represented enlightenment, not evil, the illumination of the soul through hidden knowledge. Such a concept, shared among initiates but forbidden to the masses, could indeed have been enough to doom them in the eyes of the medieval church. Across Europe, the Templars continued to expand their commanderies, but they also began to conceal their archives. Hidden rooms, false walls, underground passages, these became standard features in their architecture. Excavations in former Templar sites in Portugal, Spain, and southern France reveal subterranean vaults lined with niches, some sealed, some empty. What they once contained is unknown. Local legends speak of books that glowed like embers, of chests that could not be opened without 3 keys kept in different lands. These may be nothing more than folklore, but folklore often grows from the roots of truth. The deeper one studies the order, the clearer it becomes that they were guided by more than faith and duty. Their actions show patterns, mathematical, astronomical, symbolic. Many of their chapels, such as the one in Tomar, Portugal, align with the rising of specific stars. Their seals and sigils combine Christian crosses with older geometric symbols, reminiscent of Pythagorean and Hermetic traditions. Were these coincidences, or deliberate signs left by those who believed they were safeguarding a wisdom that transcended religion? A blueprint for understanding the divine through mathematics and light? What emerges from the fragments of history is a portrait of a brotherhood standing between worlds, between religion and science, between power and secrecy. Their loyalty to the Pope may have been genuine, but their deeper loyalty lay elsewhere. As one 14th-century chronicler wrote cryptically, they followed not the Pope, nor the king, but the architect. The meaning of that phrase has been debated for centuries. Was it a metaphor for God, or a reference to something far more literal, a lineage of knowledge traced back to the builders of the first temples? In the years just before their downfall, evidence suggests that the Templars began moving their most sacred possessions out of France. The fleet that vanished from La Rochelle may have carried not treasure, but relics and archives to safer shores, perhaps to Portugal, where the order survived under a new name, the Order of Christ. There, under royal protection, they continued quietly for generations, building strange, intricate churches adorned with both Christian and pagan symbols. The mysteries lived on, disguised as devotion. It was as if the Templars understood that their time as knights was ending, but their role as guardians had only begun. The surface world would see their destruction, the arrests, the trials, the flames, but beneath the earth, their legacy endured. Somewhere, beneath stone and soil, They had hidden something they deemed worth dying for. And centuries later, when a forgotten temple was uncovered in the hills of southern France, the echoes of their vows would resurface, reminding the world that the Templars' true mission had never ended. It had only gone underground. When the hammer of fate finally struck, it did so in silence. It was a dawn like any other on Friday, October 13th, 1307. Across France, the mist hung low over villages and fortresses alike, shrouding the world in a pale veil. Then, as church bells tolled, the king's men rode out, thousands of them, moving with ruthless precision. By the time the sun reached the horizon, the Knights Templar, once the most powerful brotherhood in Christendom, were prisoners in their own commanderies. Their crime, heresy; their punishment, obliteration. But history, as it often does, remembers what is seen. It forgets what was hidden. King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair, had orchestrated the downfall of the Templars with chilling calculation. He was a man of debts and delusions, obsessed with power and terrified of losing it. He had borrowed immense sums from the Templars to fund his wars against England and Flanders. Yet when his treasury lay empty, he saw not allies in the knights, but adversaries, guardians of wealth and secrets he could not control. To destroy them, he needed more than soldiers, he needed sin. And so, sin was invented. Under Philip's orders, a document known as the Chinon Parchment was forged and disseminated across the realm, accusing the Templars of the unthinkable: spitting on the cross, denying Christ, and worshipping idols. The Church was caught between disbelief and fear. Pope Clement V hesitated, torn between loyalty to the order and obedience to the crown. But Philip moved faster. Before the Pope could act, the arrests had begun. In Paris alone, over 100 Templars were seized before dawn. Across the countryside, monasteries were stormed, vaults pried open, archives confiscated. The confessions that followed were obtained under torture. Fire, iron, and pain crafted to break even the strongest of wills. Men who had faced death in battle without flinching screamed in agony beneath the instruments of the Inquisition. Some recanted their words moments later, others perished before they could. Yet from these forced confessions, a narrative was shaped, a narrative that justified annihilation. The Templars were declared heretics, sorcerers, servants of the devil. Their order was dissolved. Their lands were seized. Their treasures vanished. But the strangest part was this: the royal agents found far less than they expected. The grand treasuries that should have overflowed with gold were empty. The ships at La Rochelle, vessels known to carry the Templars' fortunes, were gone, sailed away days before the arrests began. Some claimed they had fled toward Scotland. Others whispered they sailed west, beyond the edge of the known world. The king had captured bodies, but not the soul of the order. Something, perhaps the most important thing, had already slipped beyond his reach. In the dungeons of Paris, the surviving Templars endured months of torment. They spoke of strange dreams, of light in darkness, of a temple buried beneath the earth. Among them was Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master. By all accounts, he was calm, even serene, during his imprisonment. Those who guarded him reported that he prayed constantly, not for deliverance, but for revelation. On March 18, 1314, after 7 years of confinement, de Molay was brought to the Isle de la Cite in Paris, where a pyre awaited him. His hands were bound, but his voice carried across the Seine as he spoke his final words: "Pope Clement, King Philip, before a year is gone, you shall answer for your deeds before the throne of God." It is said that as the flames consumed him, the wind changed direction, and the smoke blew toward the royal palace. Within the year, both Pope Clement and King Philip were dead. Chroniclers of the time called it divine retribution. Others whispered that it was something more, that de Molay had called upon a vow older than Christianity, invoking the power of whatever truth the Templars had once guarded. The fall of the Templars should have ended their story, but history refused to let it rest. Within decades, new orders arose that bore striking resemblances to the Templars: the Knights of Christ in Portugal, the Order of Montesa in Spain, the Order of the Dragon in Eastern Europe. Each claimed to be something new, yet all inherited the same symbols, the same rituals, the same quiet defiance. Portugal, in particular, became a refuge for the remnants of the order. King Denis I refused to condemn the knights. Instead, he reorganized them under a different name, preserving their structure, their secrets, and perhaps their sacred trust. Meanwhile, in Scotland, then under papal interdict and thus beyond Rome's reach, rumors grew of Templar ships landing on misty shores. Local legends tell of knights arriving with chests of stone and iron, building a chapel in Rosslyn whose walls were carved with symbols no mason could explain. Centuries later, that chapel would become the centerpiece of countless theories, a cryptic monument to the brotherhood that would not die. But the true mystery lies not in survival, but in transformation. After their destruction, the Templars ceased to exist in name, yet their influence lingered in subtle forms, in architecture, in philosophy, in secret societies that would emerge centuries later, tracing their lineage, real or imagined, to the order's forbidden wisdom. From Freemasonry to the Rosicrucians, from Renaissance alchemists to Enlightenment thinkers, echoes of the Templar creed can be heard. The pursuit of hidden truth through the light of understanding. The Church tried to erase them. The kings tried to bury them. Yet their symbols endured. The twin knights on one horse, the red cross, the sealed temple. Perhaps this endurance was not accidental, but deliberate. Perhaps, as some have speculated, the Templars foresaw their fall and encoded their beliefs in art, architecture, and myth so that even in destruction, their message would live. If so, then Jacques de Molay's final act was not defiance, but design. The fire that consumed his body might have been meant to light a new path, a torch passed in secret to those who would continue the work beneath another name. Still, one question haunts historians. What became of the Templar treasure? Chroniclers of the time spoke of vast hoards, gold, relics, scrolls, spirited away before the arrests. But treasure can mean many things. To the greedy, it meant wealth. To the wise, it meant knowledge. Some accounts describe a crux lucus, the cross of light, an artifact said to contain the secret of divine illumination. Others mention a book of the architect, written in a language unknown, said to contain the true name of God. Perhaps these were allegories. Perhaps they were not. Centuries later, when explorers and scholars unearthed Templar ruins across Europe, they found traces of something uncanny. Underground chambers filled with geometric carvings, sigils aligned with celestial coordinates, inscriptions that seemed to hint at both faith and physics. It was as if the Templars had been mapping heaven and earth as one continuum. What they were searching for or guarding remains a mystery, but their fall only deepened that mystery. The dawn raids, the trials, the pyres, these were only the surface of the story. Beneath it ran a quieter narrative, a thread that connected the Templars' birth beneath the Temple Mount to their death in the flames. That thread would resurface centuries later, when fragments of their archives were rediscovered, maps, symbols, and testimonies hinting at a location untouched by time, a place buried deep beneath the soil of southern France, where whispers claim the Templars built their final temple, not of faith, but of revelation. And there, the earth still guards their secret, waiting for the light to return. Centuries passed, and the ashes of the Templars scattered into the wind of forgotten time. Yet whispers of their name lingered like ghostly embers, glowing faintly in the cracks of history. Monks spoke of hidden vaults. Sailors told tales of ships that vanished into the mist. Scholars dreamed of lost manuscripts, written in symbols older than Latin. The world changed. The Renaissance dawned. Kings rose and fell. But somewhere beneath the rhythm of centuries, the Templar legend refused to die. Their red cross faded from banners but burned ever brighter in imagination. And then, in the hills of southern France, the earth began to speak again. It started with a discovery, small, almost accidental. In 1898, a farmer plowing his land near Rennes-le-Château struck stone where no stone should have been. Beneath layers of soil, he uncovered a series of smooth, hand-cut blocks forming a sealed entrance. Thinking it the remains of an old Roman wall, he reported it to the local priest, Abbé Bérenger Saunière. What followed would become one of the strangest and most enduring mysteries of modern Europe. Saunier, a poor cleric in a remote parish, suddenly became wealthy beyond imagination. He renovated the crumbling church of St. Mary Magdalene with ornate decorations that defied both taste and theology. Demons supporting holy fonts, inscriptions about the apocalypse, and paintings that seemed to hide codes within their brushstrokes. Within a few years, the once destitute priest was hosting noble visitors and building towers overlooking the valley, one of which he named Tour Magdala, after the very saint whose name had graced the Templars' earliest myths. The villagers whispered that Saunier had found something buried beneath the church. Officially, he claimed to have discovered old parish documents, but his sudden fortune and his erratic behavior told another story. Researchers later noted that the church itself had once been part of lands owned by the Templars before their fall. The nearby mountains were riddled with caves, many of which showed signs of medieval construction. Arches, stairways, tunnels carved with remarkable precision. Beneath the quiet landscape, it seemed, lay an unseen world. When modern archaeologists began to explore the region in the mid-20th century, they uncovered traces that reignited the legend. Deep in the limestone hills, they found a network of tunnels connecting ancient chapels and ruins, some leading nowhere, others sealed by collapses. Among these passages, symbols were discovered. The 8-pointed cross of the Templars, the Lamb of Christ, and geometric markings that seemed to form maps rather than decorations. The alignment of these sites corresponded strikingly with constellations, particularly Orion, the same celestial pattern that many Templar structures had been built to reflect. It was as if the order had left behind not ruins, but coordinates. The deeper researchers dug, the stranger the findings became. In one cavern beneath Montségur, the fortress once held by the Cathars, another heretical sect said to have shared secrets with the Templars, archaeologists unearthed fragments of stone carved with Hebrew and Greek letters intertwined. The inscription, partially deciphered, read, "Custodes luminis dormient," the keepers of the light sleep. It was a phrase never before seen in medieval texts but eerily similar to one that appeared centuries earlier in Templar charters. It seemed impossible yet undeniable. Was there a connection between the Templars and the Cathars, between the guardians of the temple and the keepers of the light? Historians had long noted that both groups shared certain unorthodox beliefs. Disdain for materialism, reverence for secret knowledge, and hints of dualist theology. Light against darkness, spirit against flesh. When the Cathar fortress fell to the Inquisition in 1244, legend claimed that 4 of their knights escaped with a treasure entrusted to them by the Templars. No gold was ever found, but in local folklore that treasure was not material, it was a book of light. The idea seems fanciful, yet in the labyrinth of French caves and chapels, murals and inscriptions repeatedly reference the light within the stone, as though memorializing a teaching too dangerous to write outright. By the 20th century, Rennes-le-Château became the epicenter of conspiracy theories, linking the Templars to everything from the Holy Grail to the bloodline of Christ. Some researchers dismissed these stories as romantic nonsense. Others saw a pattern too consistent to ignore. Even Saunier's church, when analyzed through architectural geometry, revealed precise proportions echoing those found in Templar commanderies, ratios based on sacred mathematics derived from Solomon's temple. The same measurements reappeared in structures built by the Order of Christ in Portugal centuries after the Templar suppression. How could an isolated priest in rural France have known such designs? Unless, of course, the knowledge had been preserved, passed through generations, hidden within the very stones of faith. In 1967, an expedition led by a French historian named Jacques Rivière made a startling discovery in one of these caverns. After clearing debris from a collapsed tunnel, they found a circular chamber carved directly into the rock, its ceiling forming a perfect dome. At its center stood an altar-like stone, unadorned but precisely cut. Beneath it, a shallow cavity contained fragments of pottery, scorched by fire, and a broken metal disc engraved with the faint outline of a cross within a circle. Tests later showed the metal to be of medieval origin, unusual in its composition with traces of mercury and silver. The design was identical to a symbol found on Templar seals in Jerusalem. Rivière's report was never published in full. Shortly after his return, he withdrew from public life, claiming that what he had uncovered was not ready to be understood. His notes, recovered after his death, contained only one cryptic line: "They built not to worship, but to preserve." Those words, enigmatic yet powerful, reignited global fascination with the Templar mystery. What were they preserving? A relic? A truth? Or perhaps something that bridged the two? A revelation hidden beneath the earth, waiting for those who could see beyond faith and myth. Today, the hills of southern France remain quiet, but those who venture into their depths often describe a strange sensation, a sense of being watched, of time bending inward. Locals speak of lights flickering in the caves at night, of whispers that rise when the wind passes through the stones. Scientists explain these as natural phenomena, reflections, air currents. Yet for those who believe the Templars still guard their secret beneath these lands, the explanation feels incomplete. The connection between the Templars, the Cathars, and Rennes-le-Château forms more than a coincidence. It forms a map, a line through history connecting faith, knowledge, and concealment. If the Templars truly did recover something from beneath the Temple Mount, perhaps they brought it here, to the one place where the Church's reach faltered. The south of France was a land of rebellion and mysticism, a place where ideas outlawed by Rome could still breathe. To bury something there would not only hide it from kings and popes, it would protect it until the world was ready to receive it again. As the 20th century gave way to the 21st, technology allowed new explorations of these ancient sites. Ground-penetrating radar revealed anomalies beneath certain chapels, hollow spaces arranged in deliberate geometric formations. Archaeologists are cautious, unwilling to claim proof of anything extraordinary. But among independent researchers, the belief persists that one of these chambers holds the final Templar secret, the Lost Temple built beneath the earth. Whether it holds a relic, a library, or something beyond comprehension, one truth remains certain: the legend of the Templars refuses to stay buried. The soil itself seems to guard their story, whispering to those who listen closely enough that beneath every stone, beneath every silence, the past is still alive, waiting to be unearthed. The modern rediscovery of the Templar mystery began not with knights or priests, but with explorers and scholars who refused to accept the boundaries of conventional history. In the early 20th century, as Europe rebuilt itself from the ashes of war, an obsession began to take hold among archaeologists, mystics, and secret societies alike: the search for what the Templars had truly guarded. While the world spoke of their treasure as gold or relics, a growing number of thinkers believed the Templars had preserved something far more profound, knowledge so ancient it predated Christianity itself. And that belief drew eyes back to one particular region, the Languedoc, southern France, where the earth seemed to whisper the Templars' forgotten vows. It was in 1924 that a British scholar named Edmund Llewellyn first proposed the theory of Templar continuity. His writings, later banned by the Church for blasphemy, claimed that the order had been the inheritors of a hidden stream of wisdom flowing from the Temple of Solomon through the Essenes, the Gnostics, and the early Christian mystics. He argued that beneath their outward faith, the Templars had guarded the remnants of an ancient priesthood devoted not to worship, but to understanding divine light, the force said to animate creation itself. According to Llewellyn, this knowledge was neither magical nor heretical, but scientific in nature, a kind of sacred physics, encoded in geometry and light, preserved in secret after the destruction of the Second Temple. His ideas might have been dismissed as fantasy, were it not for a discovery made a decade later. In 1935, a group of French spelunkers exploring the caves near Rennes-les-Bains stumbled upon a hidden passage that led into an underground chamber. Inside, they found carved reliefs, crosses within circles, suns flanked by wings, and inscriptions in both Latin and Greek. One fragment, later deciphered by scholars, read, "The temple below guards the sky above." It was a phrase so strange, so deliberate, that it could not be ignored. Even more curious, the style of carving matched those found in known Templar sites across Europe. Whatever this chamber had been, it bore the unmistakable mark of the order. The Second World War interrupted much of the research in the region, but it also brought new eyes to it, eyes with darker intentions. The Nazi Ahnenerbe, the research division of Heinrich Himmler's SS, dispatched teams across France searching for relics connected to the Templars. Himmler was obsessed with the idea that the order had safeguarded a pure ancient knowledge, a key to power beyond science or religion. Local records confirm that German units excavated near Montségur and Rennes-le-Château, though what they found, if anything, remains unknown. After the war, villagers spoke of trucks leaving the area at night, carrying sealed crates that vanished into the forests. Decades later, declassified Allied reports revealed that some of those crates were recovered in 1945, containing fragments of stone tablets and metallic objects engraved with geometric patterns unlike anything previously recorded in medieval Europe. It was in the aftermath of these discoveries that modern Templar research truly began to evolve. The academic establishment scoffed at the more mystical interpretations, yet the evidence kept growing. In the 1950s, aerial surveys revealed that the arrangement of Templar sites across the Languedoc formed patterns, triangles and pentagrams aligned with celestial bodies. These formations, invisible to those on the ground, mirrored the stars of Orion and Sirius. To the Templars, the stars were not just points of light, they were reflections of divine architecture. The Hermetic maxim, as above, so below, seemed to guide their designs. By the 1970s, the story of Rennes-le-Château had captured the imagination of a new generation of researchers. Books and documentaries speculated wildly. Some claimed Saunière had found proof that Jesus survived the crucifixion. Others that the Holy Grail itself was buried beneath his church. Yet beneath the sensationalism, one quiet truth remained. Wherever Saunière's wealth had come from, it was real, and it had transformed a forgotten corner of France into a place of pilgrimage for seekers of hidden truth. The graffiti carved into the stones by these modern pilgrims bore testimony to the enduring magnetism of the Templar name. Among the serious researchers was a French historian named Dr. Lucien Moreau. In 1981, he gained special permission to conduct limited excavations beneath the ruins of an old Templar commandery near Arques. What he found there would redefine the study of the order. Beneath several feet of soil, Moreau's team uncovered the entrance to a small crypt. Inside lay fragments of stone coffins, pieces of armor, and, most remarkably, a wall carving unlike anything seen in medieval Europe. It depicted a large circular design, concentric rings surrounding a central point, radiating out like ripples in water. Around it were Latin words, Lux de sub terra surgit. The light rises from beneath the earth. When the chamber was dated to the 13th century, it raised more questions than it answered. Why would a Christian order associate divine light with the earth rather than the heavens? What did the symbol mean? Moreau suggested that the carving represented not a sun or star, but a map, a cosmological diagram expressing the Templar belief in illumination as something both physical and spiritual, a force that lay hidden within the material world. He proposed that the Templars saw the earth itself as sacred, a vessel for divine energy, and that their mission had been to locate and protect sites where that energy converged, temples of light, both literal and metaphorical. As with all discoveries that challenge orthodoxy, Moreau's findings were quickly buried under controversy. The Church dismissed them as misinterpretations. Other scholars accused him of romanticizing myth. Yet others quietly followed in his footsteps, exploring the connection between ancient sacred sites, geomagnetic anomalies, and Templar architecture. Some began to suspect that the order's fascination with sacred geometry and architecture was not merely symbolic, but functional, that their buildings were designed to harness the flow of natural energy through stone and space, creating resonance, light, and harmony. It was the intersection of spirituality and science, a marriage that the medieval church had long sought to suppress. Modern physicists might scoff, but even today, researchers have measured unusual electromagnetic readings in Templar ruins. Chapels built on specific alignments exhibit magnetic fluctuations that defy easy explanation. Were these coincidences, or had the Templars indeed discovered something about the Earth's natural forces, something their enemies could not understand, and so branded as heresy? In the quiet village of Rennes-le-Château, as tourists wander the ornate church Saunière, rebuilt more than a century ago, few realize how many layers of mystery lie beneath their feet. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted in recent years have revealed chambers that have yet to be explored, sealed vaults that may have remained untouched since the 14th century. What they contain, if anything, remains unknown. French authorities, wary of looting and speculation, have banned new excavations. Yet whispers persist among local historians that one of those chambers aligns perfectly with the coordinates found in the lost notes of Jacques Rivière, the archaeologist who had vanished decades earlier after his own discovery of a Templar chamber. If the Templars truly did build a temple beneath the earth, it was not merely a sanctuary. It was a message, encoded in stone and geometry, waiting for an age capable of decoding it. Perhaps that age has come. As digital mapping, physics, and history converge, the old myths begin to take new shape, revealing a pattern of knowledge that transcends religion. The Templars may not have been worshipping idols or hoarding treasure. They may have been safeguarding the very idea that light, divine or otherwise, is hidden within creation itself, waiting to be understood. And as the last rays of sunlight sink behind the hills of southern France, casting long shadows over the valleys once walked by knights and heretics alike, one cannot help but wonder, did the Templars truly die in the flames of Paris? Or did they succeed in their ultimate vow, to guard the light until the world was ready to see it once more? The story of the Templars could have ended in 1314, when Jacques de Molay was burned alive in Paris. Yet history has a strange way of refusing to bury its secrets. For centuries after their supposed extinction, faint echoes of the order began to appear across Europe, whispers of survival, fragments of their symbols carved into forgotten churches, and records of mysterious brotherhoods that claimed descent from the poor fellow soldiers of Christ. By the 15th century, these traces began to form a pattern too intricate to ignore. The question arose once again. If the Templars were destroyed, who had continued their work? One of the earliest hints came from Portugal, a nation that owed much of its early power to the Templars. When Pope Clement V disbanded the order, King Denis of Portugal refused to turn on his knights. Instead, he quietly reconstituted them under a new name, the Order of Christ. Their lands, fortresses, and symbols remained the same. Only their banner changed. Historians have long debated whether this was mere political maneuvering or an act of deliberate preservation. Either way, the Order of Christ became a silent vessel for Templar continuity. And it was under this banner that Portugal would launch the Age of Discovery, its ships bearing the very cross that once flew over the walls of Jerusalem. The connection deepens when we look at Henry the Navigator, the visionary prince who financed the early voyages that mapped the coasts of Africa and opened the path to the New World. Henry was Grand Master of the Order of Christ. Under his guidance, navigators like Vasco da Gama and Pedro Alvarez Cabral sailed with ships emblazoned with Templar insignia, guided by an obsession with the stars and geometry. Their voyages were not just imperial, they were spiritual. To many in Henry's court, exploration was a sacred mission, an expansion of the temple across the face of the earth. The maps they created bore strange symbols and lines that some historians believe represented not just geography but lay paths, routes of energy that echoed the Templar fascination with sacred alignment. But Portugal was not the only refuge. In Scotland, a land beyond papal control, there are persistent legends that surviving Templars fled there after their persecution in France. Local folklore in Rosslyn and Argyll speaks of knights arriving by ship, bringing with them treasure, relics, and forbidden texts. The Rosslyn Chapel, built in the mid-15th century by William Sinclair, has long been linked to these legends. Its intricate carvings depict scenes and symbols that seem centuries ahead of their time: corn and aloe plants native to the Americas, Masonic designs, and depictions of the Temple of Solomon. Whether coincidence or proof, the imagery suggests a continuity of thought, a thread unbroken since the Templars' fall. The Sinclairs themselves were later instrumental in the founding of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, an organization whose rituals, symbols, and hierarchies mirror those of the Templars with uncanny precision. The square, the compass, the temple, the oath of secrecy, all echo the lost order. In Masonic legend, the temple is not a physical building but a spiritual construct, a metaphor for the perfection of humanity through knowledge. This echoes what many scholars believe was the Templars' hidden theology, that enlightenment was the true path to God. Whether through architecture, geometry, or ritual, they sought to build the divine within themselves. Across Europe, similar echoes appear. In Germany, the Teutonic Knights absorbed remnants of the order. In Spain, the Order of Montesa took their properties. In Venice, secret guilds maintained Templar archives under the guise of mercantile networks. The order seemed to dissolve like smoke, yet every fragment of that smoke carried a spark that refused to die. The mystery deepens in the 17th century, with the appearance of the Rosicrucians, an enigmatic brotherhood that claimed to possess ancient wisdom uniting science, mysticism, and religion. Their manifestos spoke of hidden temples and the fraternity of the chosen. The language they used, light as truth, geometry as divine order, the rebirth of knowledge, was steeped in Templar ideals. Some historians believe the Rosicrucian movement was not a new creation, but a reemergence of the same current of thought that had flowed through the Templars centuries earlier. Yet perhaps the most striking continuity came in the 18th century with the formal rise of Freemasonry. In 1737, a public address in France openly declared that the Masons were heirs to the Knights Templar. The idea spread like wildfire, and Masonic lodges across Europe adopted Templar imagery in their rituals. In the higher degrees of the Scottish Rite, the legend of the Templar martyrdom became a central theme, the initiate symbolically avenging the death of de Molay, seeking to rebuild what had been destroyed. The continuity was not merely symbolic. In 1804, in Paris, a man named Bernard Raymond Fabre-Palaprat announced the revival of the Ordre du Temple. He claimed to possess ancient documents proving an unbroken lineage from the original Templars through hidden Grand Masters. His order performed elaborate ceremonies, wore the Red Cross, and pledged to uphold the principles of chivalry and enlightenment. Napoleon Bonaparte himself reportedly tolerated their existence, intrigued by their ideals. Whether Fabre-Palaprat's documents were authentic or forged remains uncertain, but his movement reignited public fascination with the Templars' survival. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, this fascination merged with the rising tide of occultism. Writers like Eliphas Levi and later Aleister Crowley interpreted the Templars as keepers of hidden esoteric truths, guardians of the light of Lucifer, which they saw not as evil, but as the light of knowledge defying ignorance. This controversial reinterpretation cemented the Templars' image as both saints and heretics, symbols of humanity's eternal struggle between dogma and discovery. But perhaps the most intriguing clue to their survival lies not in Europe, but in the Americas. Some researchers have pointed to carvings and stone markings found in Nova Scotia, particularly on Oak Island, which bear Templar crosses and inscriptions resembling those found in 12th century France. Local legends tell of European visitors who arrived long before Columbus, burying something beneath the earth, something of immense importance. Could the Templars, through their Portuguese successors, have crossed the Atlantic, continuing their mission in secret? The idea has been dismissed by mainstream historians, yet the alignment of symbols, maps, and legends continues to invite speculation. When viewed together, these threads form a tapestry that suggests something remarkable, that the order did not truly vanish, but evolved. Each new generation carried the spark of its vision, sometimes as explorers, sometimes as masons, sometimes as seekers of hidden truth. The temple, then, was never meant to be a single building or organization. It was an idea, passed from hand to hand, adapted to survive the changing tides of history. Today, the symbols of the Templars still appear in unexpected places. In Masonic lodges, in church architecture, in national emblems, even in the designs of modern space agencies. The Red Cross, the equal-arm geometry, the sunburst, all echoes of a vision born nearly 1,000 years ago. And as we trace their legacy through time, one question becomes harder to ignore. If their order truly perished, why does its shadow still stretch across the world? The answer may lie not in bloodlines or secret orders, but in the persistence of an idea that somewhere, beneath the surface of ordinary history, there exists a thread of continuity, guiding humanity toward a hidden light. And if the Templars' true temple was never made of stone, but of knowledge and will, then perhaps their greatest work is still unfinished. Their temple may still be rising brick by invisible brick, in the hearts and minds of those who seek the truth they once guarded. By the time the 20th century reached its midpoint, the world had changed beyond recognition, but the shadow of the Templars refused to fade. The wars, the revolutions, and the relentless march of modernity had buried many mysteries, but some refused to stay buried. In the decades following the Second World War, new discoveries began to hint that the Templar story was not merely a relic of medieval legend, but a living thread connecting ancient faiths, forbidden sciences, and secret traditions that still influenced the modern world. It began, as many great rediscoveries do, with a whisper from beneath the earth. In 1947, a Bedouin shepherd threw a stone into a cave near the Dead Sea and heard the sound of breaking pottery. What he had stumbled upon would become one of the greatest archaeological finds of the century, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Hidden for nearly 2,000 years, these texts contained fragments of scripture and teachings that predated Christianity. Among them were writings that described a sect known as the Essenes, a mystical brotherhood that lived near Qumran. The Essenes believed in purity, communal living, and the pursuit of divine knowledge through discipline and meditation. More importantly, they believed that the body was the temple of light, a vessel through which divine energy flowed. To scholars studying the Templars, this discovery was electrifying. For decades, researchers like Edmund Llewellyn and Dr. Lucien Moreau had proposed that the Templars inherited esoteric knowledge from ancient sects such as the Essenes. The scrolls seemed to confirm that such traditions did exist, traditions centered on inner illumination rather than external worship. The parallels between the Essene philosophy and the supposed Templar rituals described in suppressed medieval documents were uncanny. Both spoke of initiations, secret teachings, and the idea of transforming the self into a vessel for divine light. Could it be that the Templars had not simply protected holy relics but safeguarded a hidden lineage of wisdom stretching back to the time of Christ? The theory gained further strength in the 1950s, when excavations in Jerusalem uncovered foundations believed to be part of the original Temple of Solomon. Among the findings were fragments of carvings bearing geometric patterns, interlocking circles and stars resembling those found in Templar churches across Europe. Some archaeologists dismissed the resemblance as coincidence, but others saw evidence of continuity. If the Templars had indeed occupied the Temple Mount during the Crusades, as records confirm, they may have discovered ancient archives or relics preserved beneath its stones, knowledge that would later fuel their meteoric rise and fatal fall. At the same time, strange new documents began to surface in Europe. In 1956, an anonymous collector in Madrid sold a series of parchment fragments to a private museum. These fragments, allegedly copied from Templar codices before the order's destruction, contained diagrams of circular structures labeled Domus Lux. The text accompanying them spoke of temples of resonance, designed to align with the stars and the flow of the Earth's energy. When scientists analyzed the geometry of several known Templar sites, including the chapels at Tomar, Leon, and Ponferrada, they discovered consistent mathematical ratios matching those found in classical sacred architecture, from the pyramids of Egypt to the temples of Greece. To skeptics, it was pseudoscience, but to others, it was a revelation. The Templars, they argued, had rediscovered the ancient, sacred measure, the universal proportion that governed harmony in nature and design. These temples were not merely houses of worship. They were instruments of resonance, built to capture and reflect the divine frequencies of the cosmos. The cryptic phrase, "the light rises from beneath the earth," found in Moreau's excavation suddenly took on a deeper meaning. Light was not only a symbol of God, it was an energy that could be channeled, magnified, and even awakened through stone and geometry. By the 1960s, the intersection of science, mysticism, and archaeology became fertile ground for speculation. The birth of the space age reignited humanity's fascination with the stars, and once again, the Templars' celestial alignments were revisited with new tools. Using satellite imagery and astronomical software, researchers confirmed that many Templar commanderies aligned not only with solstices and equinoxes but also with specific constellations tied to ancient myth, the same constellations revered by Egyptian and Mesopotamian priests. Could the Templars have seen themselves as inheritors of a universal priesthood, bridging heaven and earth through architecture? Meanwhile, in France, strange events were unfolding that brought the old mysteries crashing into the modern world. In 1967, a team conducting geological surveys near Rennes-le-Château detected anomalies beneath the ground, a network of chambers and tunnels stretching far beyond what had been previously mapped. Permission to excavate was denied by the French Ministry of Culture, citing instability concerns, but rumors spread quickly. Locals spoke of foreign teams visiting at night, of lights seen flickering on the hills, and of unmarked helicopters hovering over the area. When a few daring explorers tried to enter the restricted zone, they were turned away by gendarmes who refused to explain who had issued the orders. The secrecy only deepened the intrigue. Independent researchers began cross-referencing these modern findings with medieval maps, uncovering a curious pattern. Many of the ancient Templar properties in southern France, when plotted together, formed geometric alignments that seemed to converge near Rennes-le-Château, precisely where the anomalies had been detected. The design resembled a vast mandala or cosmic diagram, centered around a point that, according to old local legends, was where the earth breathes. As the Cold War intensified, the idea of hidden technology and lost knowledge gained new meaning. In the 1970s, the CIA's Stargate project explored psychic phenomena and remote viewing, an attempt to harness unseen forces for strategic advantage. While the project was classified, later disclosures revealed a surprising detail. Several of the researchers involved cited the Templars and early alchemists as influences on their theories of mind and energy. To them, the order represented humanity's first systematic exploration of invisible forces, the same forces modern science was now attempting to quantify. The fusion of ancient wisdom and modern curiosity reached a climax in 1989 when a small team of geologists and historians obtained special permission to study electromagnetic fields at the Templar fortress of Tomar in Portugal. Using newly developed resonance sensors, they detected faint, rhythmic pulses emanating from the chapel's foundation, pulses that repeated at regular intervals, consistent with the natural Schumann resonance of the Earth itself. Though the readings could have been caused by geological factors, the alignment with the chapel's central axis seemed deliberate. The team proposed a daring hypothesis, that the Templars had designed their structures to act as amplifiers of natural energy, a literal manifestation of their motto, non nobis domini, non nobis, sed nomini tua de gloriam. Not to us, Lord, but to your name give the glory. If this was true, then the temple they guarded was not only spiritual but scientific. A technology of harmony, lost in the fires of persecution, now rediscovered at the threshold of a new age. Yet even as modern science caught glimpses of what the Templars might have understood, the mystery remained incomplete. For every document found, another disappeared. For every excavation, another was sealed off. By the end of the 20th century, a quiet consensus had formed among serious researchers that the Order's greatest secret was not buried treasure or relics, but knowledge deliberately hidden until humanity was ready to use it responsibly. And perhaps that time is near. As digital archaeology, frequency analysis, and historical linguistics converge, the patterns once dismissed as myth begin to align with measurable reality. The light beneath the earth may not be a metaphor after all, but a description of forces we are only beginning to understand. If that is true, then the legend of the Templars was never about the past. It was a warning and an invitation, a reminder that buried beneath the ruins of faith and power lies something older, purer, and infinitely more dangerous. The truth that knowledge itself is sacred, and that those who guard it walk forever between enlightenment and destruction. By the dawn of the 21st century, the mystery of the Templars had transformed from a historical curiosity into a global obsession. Academics, theologians, adventurers, and conspiracy theorists all vied to interpret their story, each layer of discovery birthing another question rather than an answer. Yet behind the noise and speculation, a quieter and far more unsettling pattern began to emerge, one that suggested that what the Templars sought was not merely symbolic wisdom, but something physically real, something that had once been hidden deep beneath the ground and perhaps still was. It was not about who the Templars were, but what they had found. In 2002, a joint Franco-British archaeological team began an authorized excavation beneath the ruins of Château de Blanchefort, a remote fortress perched above the valley of Rennes-le-Château. Officially, The team was investigating early medieval occupation layers, but unofficially, several of the archaeologists involved admitted they were looking for anomalous architecture. Within weeks, they uncovered what appeared to be an underground passage sealed with limestone blocks. Initial dating placed its construction between the 12th and 13th centuries, precisely during the height of Templar activity in the region. Inside the passage were faint traces of carvings: a cross within a circle, a triangle inside another triangle, and what looked like an incomplete Latin phrase: Lux, Terrae, Mene, the light of the earth remains. When the discovery became public, the media descended on the site, and speculation exploded. The church requested immediate access, citing concerns over disturbance of consecrated ground, but local authorities refused. Then, mysteriously, funding for the project was cut off. The lead archaeologist, Dr. Adrien Colbert, resigned and later claimed that certain findings from the lower chamber had been removed before his team could analyze them. He refused to say by whom. His statement hinted at something extraordinary. "We found evidence that the builders of this tunnel possessed a form of engineering knowledge inconsistent with the 13th century. Someone or something influenced them." He left academia soon after, vanishing from public life altogether. While many dismissed Colbert's remarks as paranoia, a few researchers took his claims seriously. One of them, an astrophysicist-turned-historian named Dr. Mara Ellison, began re-examining old Templar sites across Europe using advanced ground-penetrating radar and resonance mapping. Her results were astonishing. Beneath nearly every major commandery she surveyed, from Tomar in Portugal to Geysers in Normandy, there were voids, tunnels, or subterranean chambers aligned with mathematical precision. Many of these alignments pointed not toward other Templar structures, but toward celestial coordinates, particularly those associated with the star Sirius and the constellation Orion's belt. To Ellison, the implications were clear. The Templars were not just masons of stone. She wrote in her 2005 book, The Geometry of Revelation. They were masons of the heavens. Their temples were not only built upon the earth but were reflections of the sky. In their geometry, they encoded a cosmic map, a way to locate or access something hidden beneath both heaven and earth. Her theory attracted both acclaim and ridicule. Mainstream scholars called it romantic mysticism dressed in science, but others, including several physicists, found her data compelling. The precision of the alignments, they noted, could not be explained by coincidence or superstition. In 2007, Ellison and her small team obtained temporary permission to conduct a low-frequency scan beneath the fields surrounding Rennes-le-Château. What they detected stunned them. A massive, dome-like structure buried nearly 100 feet below the surface, measuring over 40 meters across. Its symmetrical shape and dense material signature did not match any known geological formation. The readings suggested metal, not iron or bronze, but something denser, unfamiliar. Before further testing could be done, the French government abruptly halted the project, citing heritage protection concerns. The site was sealed and access restricted. Ellison's later interviews hinted at growing fear. "Something down there reacts to energy. When we ran the second scan, the instruments spiked. It was as if the ground itself responded." Unbeknownst to the public, fragments of Ellison's data were quietly shared with private research foundations. One such group, operating under the name the Arcanum Institute, began compiling electromagnetic, geological, and historical evidence from Templar sites worldwide. Their internal report, leaked years later, contained chilling conclusions. The buried structures followed a global network of alignments corresponding to known fault lines, magnetic nodes, and ancient sacred sites, from Stonehenge to Jerusalem, from Chartres to the Great Pyramid. It was as if the Templars had mapped an invisible web that covered the earth, marking points of resonance where the planet's energy, or whatever one chooses to call it, could be harnessed or concentrated. According to the Arcanum report, the Templars' temple beneath the earth was not a single location, but part of a greater design. A network that formed a kind of planetary engine, a system of balance and connection between earth and sky. The implications bordered on science fiction, yet the data was real, the geometry irrefutable. If true, the report concluded, the Templars may have inherited not only the spiritual traditions of antiquity, but a form of proto-geophysics, a technology of the Earth itself. When this leak reached the public in 2011, it reignited interest in the Templars across the world. Documentaries, online forums, and academic debates exploded. Some dismissed it as a hoax. Others saw it as the key to understanding everything from sacred architecture to ancient myths of the underworld. The Church remained silent, refusing to comment. Yet a curious event occurred soon after. The Vatican quietly announced the digitization of thousands of medieval documents previously sealed in the secret archives, including the original Templar trial records. Among them was a little-known transcript of testimony given by a knight named Etienne de Foix during the Inquisition in 1308. De Foix's words, when translated, echoed eerily with modern discoveries. Beneath the stones of the temple we found the light that moves in silence. It is not fire, nor gold, but a thing that awakens the heart and humbles the flesh. We were sworn to guard it until the appointed time, when the earth and the stars would once again be one. For centuries, scholars had treated such statements as symbolic mysticism, but in the light of recent findings, they suddenly felt tangible, disturbingly literal. By the mid-2010s, Ellison's research took an even stranger turn. She noticed correlations between seismic data and ancient temple networks, subtle vibrations that pulsed in harmony with the very same frequencies measured at Templar sites. Her conclusion was radical. The buried structures might have been designed to resonate with the planet's natural rhythm, not to exploit it, but to stabilize it. In her final interview before retreating from public life, she posed a question that lingers like an echo. What if the Templars were not preparing for war or guarding treasure? What if they were safeguarding something far older than humanity itself, the balance of the world? Today, satellite imagery, LiDAR mapping, and digital archaeology continue to reveal traces of tunnels, vaults, and chambers stretching beneath the European landscape. Officially, they are dismissed as quarries, crypts, or abandoned mines. Unofficially, they align too precisely with Templar geometry to be accidental. The deeper we dig, the clearer it becomes that the Templars' temple was never lost, only waiting for rediscovery. And as humanity inches closer to understanding the hidden language of the earth, frequencies, resonance, energy grids, we may find that the Knights of the Temple were not relics of a superstitious age, but pioneers of a knowledge that modern science is only now beginning to touch. Their light beneath the earth might not be a metaphor for faith, but a literal phenomenon, an ancient force pulsing through stone, soil, and time itself. Perhaps the Templars did not die protecting treasure. Perhaps they died protecting us from the very power they had unearthed. When dawn broke over the Languedoc hills that spring, it carried with it more than the soft hum of bees and the scent of pine. Beneath the calm, the land seemed to remember, as though the earth itself was aware of what slept within it. By now, whispers about a temple buried below had spread across Europe's academic circles. The French government, perhaps realizing the intensity of public interest, discreetly permitted limited research under the guise of environmental geophysical assessment. Among the scientists invited to consult was Dr. Mara Ellison, her reputation now balancing between brilliance and heresy. She knew this might be her last chance to find proof, the proof that the Templars had built not merely monuments of faith, but machines of knowledge. In early April, the excavation began near a collapsed well adjacent to the Rennes-le-Château plateau, a site long rumored in local folklore to conceal a doorway to the underworld. The legends were vague but persistent. Villagers claimed that on certain nights, when the moon was full, faint lights could be seen glimmering beneath the soil, as if something below reflected the stars. Ellison's instruments, updated with quantum resonance scanners, picked up faint electromagnetic signatures consistent with metallic density far beneath the surface. Her readings aligned perfectly with the coordinates of the previously detected dome-like structure. She knew then that the old stories might not have been stories at all. They were warnings left by generations who remembered fragments of something ancient and terrible. As the dig deepened, the soil grew colder and heavier. Nearly 20 meters down, workers encountered a layer of smooth, artificially cut stone. Unlike medieval masonry, the surface bore microscopic striations, as if shaped by heat rather than tools. Embedded within it were what appeared to be crystalline veins, quartz-like formations that faintly pulsed under direct light. No known geological process could have produced them. Ellison had the samples analyzed, and the results defied logic. The crystalline matrix contained isotopic ratios indicating it had been superheated at temperatures exceeding 2000 degrees Celsius, far beyond the capability of 13th century technology. One night, as the team worked under floodlights, a young technician named Julian noticed something odd. A section of the wall vibrating faintly, though there was no machinery nearby. When they held a sensor to it, the readings spiked erratically. Moments later, all electrical equipment in the chamber shut down. The silence that followed was heavy, oppressive, almost alive. Then, faintly, from somewhere behind the stone, came a low hum, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Panic rippled through the team, and the site supervisor ordered everyone to the surface. For hours afterward, the hum continued, pulsing in irregular intervals, until just before dawn when it ceased abruptly. The incident was never included in the official report. Over the following weeks, local authorities began to restrict access. Military personnel were seen inspecting the site, and plainclothes officials monitored the perimeter. Ellison, sensing that control was slipping away, secretly copied her data logs and sent them to trusted colleagues in England and Switzerland. In her private notes recovered years later, she wrote, "The resonance increases as we approach the core. The readings resemble bioelectrical patterns, as though the structure itself is living or remembering." That sentence alone was enough to ignite decades of debate. What could it mean for stone to remember? Historical context seemed to offer an eerie parallel. The Templar archives from Tomar contained a Latin manuscript describing the Chamber of Echoes, a hidden sanctuary where the knights heard the voice of the living stone. At first dismissed as mystical allegory, the phrasing now seemed strangely precise. Could it be that the Templars had encountered similar phenomena, vibrations, frequencies, energies, and interpreted them as divine communication? Medieval faith would have had no language for electromagnetic resonance, only for miracles and divine light. What modern science calls energy, they may have called spirit. Weeks later, a breakthrough came. Using an array of magnetometers, Ellison's team identified a central cavity beneath the crystalline wall. Drilling a narrow borehole, they lowered a microcamera into the void. The footage, grainy and brief, revealed something extraordinary. A vast circular chamber, perfectly symmetrical, lined with interlocking hexagonal panels of a metallic material. In the chamber's center stood an altar-like platform of polished stone, upon which rested a dark spherical object, reflective and smooth. The video lasted only 40 seconds before the feed cut out. But in those seconds, the world shifted. The footage leaked online within days, posted anonymously. Viewers were divided. Some saw it as proof of an ancient alien artifact, others a hoax. But experts who analyzed the shadows and angles confirmed the structure's proportions were consistent with the radar data Ellison had published years prior. The object's symmetry was flawless, beyond the craftsmanship of medieval builders. For those who believed, it was undeniable evidence. The Templars had discovered, or perhaps built, something incomprehensible beneath the earth. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, everything vanished. The French Ministry of Culture issued an immediate statement classifying the site as restricted heritage, and all public access was terminated. The scientific data disappeared from servers. The leaked video was scrubbed from major platforms. Ellison herself was summoned to Paris for consultation, after which she withdrew entirely from public life. Her final communication to colleagues was brief and cryptic. "We woke something we don't understand. It is not meant to be unearthed." After that, silence. For years, nothing more was heard. Yet the questions refused to die. Independent researchers began tracing parallels between Ellison's findings and ancient myths. The Sumerian Abzu, the Egyptian Duat, the Greek Hades, all descriptions of realms beneath the earth where divine power was stored or guarded. In nearly every myth, those who entered such places without permission were destroyed or transformed. Perhaps these were not just cautionary tales, but memories of encounters with real forces, phenomena so alien that early civilizations could only explain them through mythology. A few brave geologists and historians continued her work in secret. They found that the buried structure's resonance patterns matched a harmonic frequency recorded at multiple sacred sites worldwide: Mount Sinai, Delphi, Rosslyn Chapel. The Templars' network, it seemed, had been designed to contain or balance this energy. The deeper implication was staggering. If the light beneath the earth was a form of natural planetary power, the Templars might have been its custodians, ensuring it remained stable and sealed. If so, modern excavations could be disturbing something that was never meant to be touched again. Meanwhile, in quiet corners of Europe, strange reports began surfacing. Local farmers near the old excavation claimed their animals behaved erratically during certain moon phases. Nearby streams turned slightly luminescent under night sky. And in Rennes-le-Château itself, visitors spoke of an audible vibration at dusk, faint but unmistakable, emanating from the ground. Scientists dismissed these as psychological effects, but folklore had a different explanation. The temple breathes. That phrase, once dismissed as poetic metaphor, began to feel less symbolic and more literal. The buried Templar temple, if real, was not dead stone. It was active, responsive, connected to something beyond time. Perhaps it had always been waiting dormant, until the age of disbelief finally dared to touch it again. And so, as modern science stands on the edge of rediscovering the old mysteries, one question lingers. A question both haunting and humbling. Did the Templars, in their fervent pursuit of divine knowledge, stumble upon a power they could neither fully wield nor destroy? And if so, what happens now that we, centuries later, have begun to awaken it once more? Because if the temple truly lies beneath our feet, humming faintly in the darkness, then perhaps the Templars did not fail. Perhaps they succeeded, and what we call mystery is merely the sound of their warning echoing through time. The months that followed the silencing of the Rennes-le-Château excavation brought a strange quiet, the kind that doesn't mean peace but concealment. Officially, the project had been suspended for structural instability and potential environmental risks. Unofficially, the researchers who had been closest to the site vanished into private consultancy or academia, their silence bought or forced. And yet, even as governments sealed off entrances and filled tunnels with concrete, something in the ground continued to stir. Seismologists across southern France began noticing faint tremors that did not align with tectonic plates. They were rhythmic, patterned, pulsing at intervals too regular to be natural. It was as though the earth had begun to breathe. In a quiet Oxford library, far from the shuttered dig, a historian named Dr. Elias Caro sat surrounded by manuscripts that smelled of dust and candle soot. He was not an archaeologist, nor a physicist, but a specialist in medieval cryptography. His attention had been drawn to a set of overlooked Templar scrolls catalogued under Miscellanea Obscura, fragments recovered from the ruins of Montségur, the last Cathar stronghold. Among the torn Latin lines was a phrase that made his pulse quicken. Sub terra lumen dormiens, servatum per cordas veritatis. Beneath the earth sleeps the light, guarded by the cords of truth. Caro research soon uncovered an extraordinary link. Across different Templar documents, scattered across decades and continents, there were references to chords, lines, and harmonies. He began to suspect that these weren't metaphors at all, but descriptions of literal connections, the chords being lines of force or alignment between sacred sites. It matched Ellison's modern findings precisely, though separated by nearly 8 centuries. The Knights had somehow mapped the same resonant pathways of the planet that modern instruments were only beginning to detect. And they hadn't done it by chance. Following the trail, Caro discovered something else. A codex known as Liber Arcis, a book of uncertain origin said to have been kept by the Templar Grand Master Bertrand de Blanchefort himself. The codex, lost since the 15th century, was rumored to describe a mechanism of the earth, a structure built to maintain the balance of the ages. Through a network of collectors, Caro obtained digital scans of what was believed to be the first 7 pages of the codex, written in a strange hybrid of Latin and early Occitan. The text spoke of a vault where heaven and earth touch, and of a device forged from the memory of the sun. What struck Caro most was a peculiar diagram, concentric circles surrounding a central sphere, eerily similar to the chamber Ellison's camera had glimpsed. As he traced the geometry, Caro noticed something chilling. The outer rings aligned perfectly with geographic coordinates, specific Templar sites across Europe. Geysers, Tomar, London, Jerusalem. Each point connected to the others like a web, and Rennes-le-Château sat precisely at the intersection. This, he whispered into the empty library, was never one temple. It was the heart of a network, an organism built into the earth itself. He began cross-referencing the codex with astronomical data from the 12th and 13th centuries. The alignments were deliberate. Each site matched the rising of specific stars at key solstices, particularly Orion's belt and Sirius, long associated with rebirth and divine order. To the Templars, these stars may have represented gateways, celestial mirrors to the structures below. But to Caro, they looked like coordinates not to the heavens but to something buried. Driven by obsession, Caro traveled to France to follow the lines himself. He started in Paris at the Temple Church, once the heart of the Templars' European command. Its circular nave, modeled after the Holy Sepulchre, was built with uncanny mathematical precision. Using ground-penetrating radar data and historic blueprints, he discovered that the church's foundation geometry perfectly aligned with the Rennes coordinates. When plotted on a map, the angle between them was exactly 33 degrees, a number steeped in Masonic and esoteric symbolism, often linked to enlightenment and resurrection. From Paris, Caro journeyed south, tracing the ancient pilgrimage roads. At each stop, from Carcassonne to Béziers, he found evidence of strange subterranean anomalies. Hollow echoes under chapels, magnetically charged stones, inexplicable fluctuations in electromagnetic fields. One night in Béziers, as he recorded readings near a ruined priory, his compass spun violently, and his equipment shut off. The next morning, when he reviewed his recordings, he heard something faint in the static, a pulse low and regular, repeating every 11 seconds. The same pattern that seismologists had detected. The ground itself was transmitting. As his research deepened, Caro findings began to attract attention, and not all of it welcome. A private foundation reached out to fund his work, offering advanced scanning technology and access to sealed archives. The group identified themselves only as Custodes Lux, the keepers of the light. Their representatives spoke in measured tones, insisting that the Templars' mission had never truly ended, that certain knowledge had been preserved, passed down in silence through the centuries. They told Caro he was close to rediscovering the pulse, and that they wished to help him continue. Caro, cautious but intrigued, accepted their assistance. With their backing, he obtained high-resolution satellite data of several Templar sites, revealing symmetrical underground heat patterns. In one image, the thermal footprint of the Rennes-le-Château plateau resembled not a natural formation but an enormous geometric symbol, a cross within a circle, radiating from a central core. It was as though the earth itself bore the mark of the order. But the more data he gathered, the more erratic his readings became. Instruments malfunctioned near the sites, batteries drained without explanation, and sometimes, when he reviewed the recordings, there were sounds in the background, faint voices speaking in a language he couldn't identify. His final breakthrough came in the form of a letter, an old parchment delivered anonymously to his Oxford office. The handwriting was archaic, but the Latin was clear. The seal was placed to preserve the world from the echo below. Do not seek to break it. Attached was a hand-drawn sigil, the same concentric circles he had seen in the Liber Arcis, with one difference. The outermost ring was marked with a tear, a break. Beneath it, a single phrase, Fractura aperta est. The seal is broken. Caro notes grew increasingly erratic after that. He wrote of strange dreams, of vast underground halls filled with light, of voices chanting beneath the soil, of a black sphere pulsing like a heart. He began to suspect that the resonance detected by modern machines wasn't geological or electromagnetic, but something else entirely, consciousness, memory, or a remnant of some living intelligence encoded in the planet itself. The Templars, he realized, might have tapped into this global mind, using geometry and ritual to communicate with it, or to restrain it. Then, in late November of that year, Caro disappeared. His home was found undisturbed, his research notes intact except for one missing notebook. The last entry in his journal was brief and cryptic. The hum has changed. It no longer waits. Days later, a minor earthquake shook southern France. A tremor too shallow, too focused to be natural. Residents near Rennes-le-Château reported hearing a deep resonance beforehand, like the tolling of a bell from underground, and just as suddenly it stopped. No official explanation was given. But in certain circles, among geophysicists, esoteric historians, and those who still whispered of the Templars, a new belief took hold. The seal beneath the earth had shifted. The balance that the knights once guarded was no longer stable. And if the hum of the buried temple had changed, perhaps it was not merely sound they were hearing. Perhaps it was something awakening. In the months following Dr. Elias Caro's disappearance, the hum beneath the earth became more than a curiosity. It became a global anomaly. Across Europe, subtle tremors began appearing in regions once connected to the Templars' great commanderies. They were not typical earthquakes. They came with no tectonic shifts, no precursor waves, no damage, only a faint vibration, as if the planet itself were exhaling. Sensitive instruments picked up the same rhythmic intervals Caro had documented, 11 seconds between pulses. The same signature appeared in data from Portugal, Spain, Italy, and even the Middle East. It was as though something ancient buried beneath continents had begun to move in unison. Governments quietly commissioned studies under different names: geodynamic oscillations, underground frequency anomalies, microseismic harmonics. But privately, researchers whispered a different name: the Templar Pulse. The term spread through encrypted forums, shared between geophysicists, military analysts, and independent historians who had followed Ellison's and Caro work. Many dismissed it as pseudoscience. Yet those who listened to the raw recordings heard something impossible. Beneath the rhythmic hum, faint harmonic patterns resembling structured tones. It wasn't random noise. It was organized. In one secure facility outside Geneva, a team of physicists analyzed the waveform at extreme magnification. What they discovered defied explanation. The signal repeated in cycles of 72,000 seconds, exactly 20 hours, and each cycle contained modulations forming geometric ratios identical to those used in Gothic cathedral architecture. To the human ear, it was just a low vibration, but when translated into visible form through cymatics, the study of how sound shapes matter, the patterns resolved into the unmistakable shape of a cross within a circle surrounded by 12 smaller nodes. It was the same symbol found in the Liber Arcis and carved into Templar chapels centuries before. The coincidence was too exact to ignore. Someone or something had encoded geometry into sound, into the very pulse of the planet. Some of the team began to speculate that this might be a kind of signal from a deep geological phenomenon, but others, more quietly, wondered if it was a form of communication. One researcher noted, "If this is natural, then nature speaks in the same language the Templars recorded. Either they discovered it, or they helped create it." Meanwhile, in Paris, fragments of Dr. Caro's missing notebooks surfaced through an anonymous courier. The pages were water-damaged, the ink smeared, but several entries were legible. They spoke of voices carried in vibration, and a resonance that answers when you listen long enough. On one page, he had drawn a rough sketch of the Rennes-le-Château dome, labeling its central sphere Soar Verum, the true heart. Beneath it, he had written a single line in Latin: Nolite sonar nisi parati estis. Do not make it sound, unless you are ready. The publication of these fragments reignited public fascination. Media channels speculated wildly, theories ranging from ancient alien machinery to natural planetary resonance. But amid the noise, a small group of interdisciplinary scientists decided to take the matter seriously. They called themselves Project Lux Terrae, a direct reference to the phrase found on the Templar wall. Lux Terrae Mene. The light of the earth remains. Led by Dr. Celine Armitage, a British geophysicist with a background in sacred geometry, the group sought to prove that the pulse was real, measurable, and perhaps even controllable. Using a network of seismic stations and deep sound sensors, they mapped the pulse's frequency across the globe. To their astonishment, the energy peaks formed a lattice, an invisible grid connecting ancient sacred sites. Jerusalem, Rosslyn, the pyramids, Chartres, Delphi, and yes, Rennes-le-Château. The pattern wasn't random. It followed precise geodesic lines along the planet's magnetic field. When plotted on a globe, it resembled the petals of a vast flower, a mandala spanning continents. As Armitage's team began to publish preliminary data, their funding was abruptly cut. Several members resigned under mysterious circumstances. Others claimed to have been warned off by government agencies citing national security. Yet Armitage pressed on, continuing her work in private with the help of underground researchers and data leaks. In one recorded conversation, she made a chilling observation. The pulse isn't increasing. It's awakening, its intervals are shortening, like a heartbeat accelerating after sleep. By late summer, strange physical effects began accompanying the vibrations. In rural France, compasses spun aimlessly. In Lisbon, faint lights were seen flickering along the Tagus River. In Jerusalem, a deep hum resonated through the catacombs of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Monks claimed they heard a bell beneath the world. Across social media, recordings surfaced of a low tone echoing in the night, identical in pitch across continents. It was the same frequency Ellison scanners had once captured at Rennes-le-Château. In response, religious authorities began issuing careful statements urging calm. The Vatican's observatory released a paper attributing the hum to planetary oscillations and seismic harmonics amplified by digital media. Yet privately, several clerics in Rome expressed alarm. Unverified reports claimed that a document had been retrieved from the Vatican archives. A sealed papal letter dated 1311, written shortly after the dissolution of the Templars. It spoke of the engine beneath the world, and warned that if the custodes, guardians, were ever destroyed, the balance of the creation will tremble. That word, engine, appeared again in another source, a 15th century alchemical manuscript describing the furnace of the Templars hidden under the mountain of light. Historians had always dismissed it as allegory. Now, with the hum spreading across the globe, allegory no longer seemed so safe. By autumn, the pattern became undeniable. The pulse's amplitude increased slightly every 11 days. Satellite sensors began detecting faint electromagnetic distortions over several ancient Templar sites, including Tomar and Cyprus. Even skeptics began to worry. A French geologist named Dr. Hélène Duval proposed a radical theory. The buried temple structures might not be inert ruins but components of an ancient stabilization system, something designed to channel or diffuse energy through the planet's crust. If it is reactivating, she said in a leaked recording, we may be witnessing the reawakening of an ancient geophysical mechanism, one that humans once maintained and then forgot. Her words echoed an older fear, that the Templars hadn't been builders of temples at all, but maintainers of a planetary circuit, a network of harmonic regulators that kept the Earth's natural frequencies in balance. The moment their order was destroyed, the system began to decay, slowly, invisibly until now. Then came the Rennes event. In late November, satellite images revealed a faint thermal bloom under the French countryside, a perfect circle spanning nearly a kilometer. Locals reported a deep rumbling that lasted almost an hour. The ground itself glowed faintly blue in patches, as if charged with static. No seismic activity was officially recorded, yet within 24 hours, several European observatories reported disruptions to their magnetic readings. Dr. Armitage's final transmission to her colleagues before vanishing was brief. The heart is opening. After that, no more messages came. Project Lux Terrae was quietly dismantled, their equipment confiscated, their research servers wiped clean. But the hum did not stop. In fact, it began to synchronize. Across the planet, the pulse unified, beating as one 11 seconds apart, deeper, stronger, alive. And so, a question arose, one that no scientific model could yet answer. If the buried Templar Temple beneath the earth was indeed a machine, then what was it built to contain? Because if the heartbeat of the earth is rising again, perhaps it is not the world awakening. Perhaps it is remembering. By the beginning of the following year, the hum was no longer a rumor whispered among scientists and mystics. It had become an undeniable global phenomenon. Ordinary people began to notice it. Pilots reported faint vibrations running through the fuselage of their aircraft when crossing certain latitudes. Miners in South America described the ground resonating softly beneath their boots, like the strings of a colossal instrument. In rural France, near Rennes-le-Château, shepherds claimed they could feel the rhythm through the soles of their feet, even when the air was completely still. The media called it the earth pulse. The public, desperate for explanation, called it the Templar heartbeat. At first, officials dismissed the notion that the two were connected. But leaked internal communications between several European geological agencies revealed that the pattern of the vibrations traced not random lines, but the precise geometry of known Templar routes and fortifications. One confidential report even referred to it as a reactivation event. The phrase was chilling, not geological, not metaphorical, but mechanical. Whatever was beneath the ground was doing something. Meanwhile, an unlikely figure emerged from the shadows. Father Matteo Vieri, a Jesuit historian with ties to the Vatican's Department of Historical Preservation. He claimed to have uncovered sealed correspondence between Pope Clement V and a surviving Templar master written after the order's dissolution. In these letters, the master warned of the breach of the lower seal and begged the papacy to keep the temple beneath the earth buried at all costs. Vieri's claims, initially dismissed as fabrications, gained credibility when he released fragments of the letters to the press. The handwriting, ink composition, and linguistic structure were verified as authentic. In one letter, dated 1312, the Templar master wrote, "We did not build to glorify God, but to protect His creation. The mechanism was not of our making. We only learned to tend it. If it sleeps, let it sleep. If it stirs, pray that man remembers the words, Lux terrae Mene." The Vatican declined to comment on the authenticity of these documents, but within days, Vieri was recalled to Rome and vanished from public view. Some said he had been silenced. Others whispered that he had joined a secret order tasked with monitoring the pulse. But before disappearing, Vieri gave one final interview to an Italian journalist. His final words, broadcast only once before the footage was pulled, were haunting. "The light beneath the earth is not a metaphor. It is a covenant. The Templars were not the first to find it, only the last to understand it." Across the world, the hum began changing again. What had been a steady rhythm now fluctuated in tone and frequency. The intervals shortened from 11 seconds to 8, then to 5. Scientists detected subtle magnetic anomalies in multiple regions simultaneously, as though the planet's core had begun oscillating. Birds migrated off course, whales altered their songs, and sensitive electronics in laboratories from Tokyo to Toronto began to malfunction at precise, synchronized intervals. It was as if something buried deep within the planet was broadcasting. But to whom? Dr. Celine Armitage, presumed missing after the Rennes event, resurfaced briefly through an encrypted online conference. Pale, gaunt, and speaking from an undisclosed location, she warned her colleagues that they had woken a cycle of resonance older than recorded time. According to her, the Templar network had been designed as a stabilizing interface, a way to regulate the pulse when it grew unstable. "They didn't build the temple to worship," she said. "They built it to contain." She showed fragments of her new data, energy spikes forming a spiral pattern converging at the Rennes coordinates. "It's focusing," she whispered. "Something is building toward release." Within weeks of that transmission, she too disappeared. But fragments of her files leaked through anonymous sources. Among them was a 3D rendering of the resonance network, a global web of harmonic energy lines converging at 12 central points. The Rennes-le-Château site was the largest and brightest, and directly beneath it, her data showed what looked like a spherical cavity, expanding slowly over time as though pressure or energy was building within it. The idea spread quickly. The Templar Temple beneath the earth was not simply a chamber or artifact, but a kind of planetary heart, and it was awakening after centuries of dormancy. Online communities began referring to it as the core of light. To some, it was proof of a divine intelligence at the center of the earth. To others, it was a catastrophic countdown. As public fascination grew, so did the panic. Governments began enforcing information control, declaring that online speculation about geophysical religious conspiracies was destabilizing global morale. Scientific journals refused to publish data that mentioned the pulse. But even silence could not hide the changes. Magnetic compasses deviated by several degrees. Radio frequencies drifted unpredictably. And in the dead of night, all over the world, people began hearing the hum unaided by instruments. A deep, mournful tone that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. In towns near ancient Templar sites, strange phenomena increased. Crops began to wither in circular patterns, and animals refused to cross certain fields. Pilgrims arrived at Rennes-le-Château by the hundreds, kneeling in the dark as the ground faintly vibrated beneath them. Some claimed they could feel warmth rising from the soil. Others swore they saw faint light flickering through cracks in the earth, like the glow of distant embers. Locals called it le souffle du monde, the breath of the world. A group of independent researchers, using seismic sensors hidden in the area, captured a data sequence that would later become infamous. Over 3 nights, the sensors recorded not random pulses, but organized sequences, long, short, Morse-like patterns. When translated, the pulses spelled a single Latin word repeated over and over, revertitor. It returns. The discovery sent shockwaves through the scientific community. The idea that an underground geological vibration could encode language was unthinkable. Yet the data was verified by multiple sources. No machine interference could account for the precision. Something was using the earth itself as a medium to communicate or to warn. Religious groups interpreted it as prophecy. Scientists called it coincidence. Conspiracy theorists called it the voice of the buried temple. But beneath all the noise, one quiet truth began to crystallize. The Templars had known this day would come. A final clue surfaced from an unlikely source. A monastery archive in Portugal containing letters from a Templar engineer named Raymond of Evora. One passage read, "When the circle is broken and the pulse quickens, the vault will open. The light that sleeps shall rise. Guard it not with swords but with silence." Scholars debated the meaning endlessly, but a handful of physicists understood what silence could imply. The temple, whatever its purpose, might not withstand interference. The more humanity probed, scanned, and excavated, the faster the resonance intensified. The Templars had learned that to contain the power beneath the earth, one had to leave it undisturbed. But the world no longer knew how to leave anything in silence. Every discovery invited investigation. Every mystery demanded illumination. And so the hum continued, louder now, resonating through oceans, mountains, and the bones of every living thing. It was no longer background noise. It was the heartbeat of something vast, ancient, and aware. Somewhere, deep below the soil of Rennes-le-Château, the buried sphere pulsed again. Not mechanically, not randomly, but rhythmically. It was as if the earth itself was remembering a promise made long ago and preparing to collect on it. In the weeks that followed, seismic observatories across Europe began recording strange anomalies. Not violent tremors or traditional earthquakes, but deep rhythmic surges, waves of movement so subtle they didn't damage structures, yet so powerful they reached instruments thousands of kilometers apart. The waves emanated from southern France, then echoed outward in near-perfect symmetry. At first, scientists thought it was tectonic resonance or geothermal activity. But when the wave fronts formed patterns resembling geometric mandalas rather than chaotic noise, explanations faltered. The frequencies appeared to obey an intelligence, repeating with almost musical precision. At Rennes-le-Château, the epicenter of it all, the ground itself seemed to breathe. Locals described moments when the air turned heavy, as if a vast presence stirred beneath their feet. Birds would flee, dogs howled, and compasses spun without control. Satellite imagery captured faint electromagnetic auroras blooming directly above the site, shimmering in pale gold hues invisible to the naked eye. Yet for those standing near the ancient hilltop, the experience was unmistakable. A low vibration humming through their bones, steady, almost alive. The French government, under increasing public pressure, established a restricted zone around the region. Military vehicles arrived under cover of night, setting up perimeter fences and communication jammers. Officially, it was called Operation Terra Sombre, the Dark Earth Project. The stated reason, geological instability, but a few journalists managed to infiltrate the area before the lockdown was complete. One of them, a reporter named Isabel Durant, described in her final broadcast a blinding light flickering from a fissure near the old church of St. Mary Magdalene, a light that pulsed in sync with the Earth's hum. Her last transmission ended mid-sentence with the sound of a low roar, like the rush of wind through a cavernous hall. She was never found. Satellite footage released by whistleblowers later confirmed that a fissure had indeed opened in the valley beneath Rennes. But the light seen emanating from it was not reflection or fire. It was measured as pure electromagnetic radiation of an unknown spectrum. Within hours, all data from the area was confiscated. Public access to maps, satellite feeds, and scientific data was restricted. To the world, Rennes-le-Château was now a blank spot, a hole in the digital landscape. Meanwhile, deep beneath the Earth, automated seismic probes deployed by Dr. Armitage's team before her disappearance continued transmitting. Their final recordings showed something extraordinary: the presence of a hollow cavity expanding in perfect geometric ratios. Not a chaotic crack, but a symmetrical sphere, smooth, proportional, and pulsating. The cavity's diameter increased by several meters daily, suggesting movement or growth. Some called it the living chamber. Others called it the awakening vault. Then, one night, everything changed. The hum, that constant rhythmic pulse that had haunted the world for months, abruptly stopped. The silence was global, absolute, unsettling. Instruments that had recorded continuous resonance for nearly a year went dead. At first, the world celebrated. The news proclaimed the end of the hum, suggesting that whatever geological anomaly had caused it was finally settling. But those who had listened long enough knew something different. They described an eerie stillness, as though the world had inhaled and was holding its breath. It lasted exactly 72 hours. Then, without warning, the hum returned, not as vibration but as sound. Audible, powerful, echoing across continents. In the mountains of Spain, shepherds heard it roll through valleys like the tolling of colossal bells. In Iceland, glaciers fractured in resonance with its frequency. Radio receivers captured bursts of data in ancient numeric sequences, Fibonacci ratios, prime intervals, and harmonic divisions that corresponded with medieval Templar architecture. It was as if the sound itself encoded the mathematics of sacred design. In hidden monasteries and old archives, priests and scholars dusted off ancient Templar manuscripts, searching for meaning. A recurring symbol began to reappear: the lux terrae, the light of the earth, a circle divided into 12 rays. Each ray represented a site, one in France, one in Portugal, one in Cyprus, and others stretching across the Old World. Together, they formed a map. But unlike any map of surface geography, this one charted energy lines beneath the crust, a subterranean lattice connecting cathedrals, fortresses, and burial sites built by the Templars. The Rennes Temple was the nexus, the heart of the design. Historians began to theorize that the Templars had known the Earth possessed these harmonic alignments, ley lines of electromagnetic and acoustic energy, and that their temples had been placed not by chance, but by calculation. Their architecture was tuned, literally, to resonate with the planet's frequencies. By aligning the sacred geometry of their structures to these lines, they created a stabilizing web meant to channel and diffuse energy from the core. They had built a global containment system disguised as a network of holy sites. As this idea spread, it drew the attention of modern physicists. Dr. Amir Basra, an expert in georesonant fields, proposed that the hum was the byproduct of planetary resonance drift, a phenomenon triggered by centuries of mining, drilling, and electromagnetic interference from human technology. He argued that the Earth's natural harmonic frequency was shifting, destabilizing the balance that the Templars had once maintained. The temple, he said during a leaked interview, was not a house of worship, it was a harmonic dampener, and we've broken it. Meanwhile, those living near Rennes-le-Château began reporting strange dreams. Hundreds claimed to see visions of armored figures standing in tunnels of light beneath the earth, their swords crossed before a glowing sphere. Others saw stone corridors lined with inscriptions that pulsed like veins of light, whispering in Latin, Lux terrae minae, the light of the earth remains. Psychologists dismissed it as mass hysteria, but the detail and consistency of these visions made dismissal impossible. In one particularly chilling account, a child from Carcassonne described a dream in which a man of silver light handed him a small cube made of stone and whispered, "When the hum stops again, remember the words." Days later, the child drew the cube for his parents. Archaeologists identified the drawing as identical to the Tsubwa Templaris, a symbolic relic representing the Earth's geometric perfection, something found engraved in a handful of authentic Templar tombs. By now, the hum's intervals began fluctuating wildly. Some days, it surged to deafening intensity. On others, it dropped to silence. But during each silence, people reported feeling an inexplicable sense of anticipation, like standing before a storm that never comes. Global magnetic sensors showed anomalies forming not only beneath Rennes-le-Château but across the entire network of Templar sites. The system was activating. The final recorded event of that year came from the seismic array near the French Pyrenees. Instruments detected a pulse, not rhythmic, but singular. It traveled faster than sound, faster than seismic waves, through the crust of the earth and across oceans, circling the globe in less than 6 minutes. When it reached the opposite side, it returned to its point of origin and vanished. In the instant it did, every compass, GPS, and radio receiver on Earth blinked out simultaneously for exactly 1 second. Then the world resumed unchanged except for one detail. In the small church of St. Mary Magdalene at Rennes-le-Château, beneath centuries of dust, a single stone had shifted in the floor. Beneath it lay a black, mirror-like surface reflecting light that wasn't there. And if one listened closely, very closely, a faint sound could be heard from deep within the stone. A heartbeat, slow, steady, waiting. When the heartbeat was first detected beneath the church floor, only a handful of people knew, and even fewer understood what it meant. The discovery was made by a small team of French military engineers, sent to stabilize the site after the electromagnetic surge that had crippled local communications. While removing a section of fractured limestone near the altar, one of them, a corporal named René Duchamp, placed his hand on the exposed rock and froze. He later told his superior, "It's alive." Beneath the noise of machinery, beneath the static in his headset, he could feel it. A deep, rhythmic pulse, slow and deliberate, echoing through the stone like the beating of a buried heart. At first, the commanding officer ordered the area sealed and radioed Paris for instructions. But word spread among the men, and curiosity overpowered protocol. That night, several of them returned with handheld sensors to confirm what Duchamp had felt. The readings were undeniable. The ground emitted low-frequency vibrations at precise intervals, 72 beats per minute, exactly matching the average human heart rate. One soldier, visibly shaken, said it was as if the earth itself had synchronized with life. The data reached the command center at dawn. Within hours, the church and surrounding village were placed under complete lockdown. Residents were relocated, and satellite surveillance was intensified. A specialized team, scientists, archaeologists, and military intelligence officers, was flown in under the designation Unit LUX. Their mission was simple on paper: investigate the anomaly. But those within the unit knew it was anything but simple. When they removed more of the floor, they found that the black, glass-like surface extended in every direction. Attempts to cut or drill into it failed. Laser analysis showed no identifiable material composition. It wasn't stone, metal, or synthetic. It absorbed nearly all light and emitted faint electromagnetic radiation that pulsed in time with the heartbeat. Theories ranged from geological phenomenon to buried technology. But a single word, recovered from a classified Vatican archive by Father Matteo Vieri before his disappearance, began circulating among the researchers: Edificium Lucus, the building of light. The Vatican's silence was telling. No official statements were made, but internal communications revealed that certain church officials had demanded access to the Rennes site for spiritual oversight. Their request was denied. France, wary of external interference, declared the area a sovereign scientific facility. Privately, however, both parties shared the same fear, that whatever lay beneath the ground might awaken something that could not be contained by science or faith. Over the following weeks, Unit LUX continued to study the surface. Under high-frequency scanning, faint inscriptions became visible, patterns of interlocking circles and symbols reminiscent of Templar seals. Linguists identified fragments of Latin phrases carved into the edges of the structure. Lux terrae mene. Revertitur. Silentium custodit lusum. The light of the earth remains. It returns. Silence guards the light. Then, unexpectedly, the heartbeat began to change. Its rhythm grew irregular, then accelerated. Instruments recorded surges of energy radiating outward from the chamber into the surrounding soil, causing localized magnetic distortions. Birds fell from the sky. Electronics malfunctioned. The military issued an immediate evacuation order, but the core research team refused to leave. "It's communicating," said Dr. Camille Duval, the lead physicist. "We've triggered a response." In a desperate attempt to stabilize the readings, they deployed resonance dampeners, devices designed to absorb and neutralize vibrational energy. For a brief moment, the pulse slowed, but as soon as the machines engaged, the entire structure reacted violently. The floor split open, releasing a blinding flash of white light. Witnesses described it as silent lightning, illumination without heat, fire without flame. Several members of the team were knocked unconscious by the blast. When they awoke, the chamber was unchanged, but every clock, every watch, every digital display in the compound had reset to midnight. Time itself, it seemed, had paused. After that night, the world outside Rennes-le-Château began to change in subtle ways. Magnetometers around the globe picked up rhythmic pulses synchronized with the same 72 per minute beat. Oceans began to exhibit microtides unaccounted for by lunar cycles. Auroras appeared in regions where they had never been seen before, not green or red, but pure white. And in several ancient cathedrals built by the Templars, candles would flicker in perfect rhythm to the unseen pulse. Across continents, individuals started reporting shared visions of vast subterranean halls bathed in golden light, of stone knights standing motionless before a radiant sphere suspended in the dark. Many of these people had no connection to each other, no knowledge of the Templar mystery, yet their descriptions matched almost exactly. Psychologists dismissed it as mass psychogenic illness, but the phenomenon defied medical explanation. Meanwhile, Dr. Duval and her remaining team continued their work, now under complete secrecy. They discovered that when certain frequencies were played near the black surface, faint images would appear within it, reflections not of the laboratory, but of unfamiliar structures. Staircases leading into infinite darkness, pillars carved with symbols from multiple ancient civilizations, and what appeared to be moving lights, like stars beneath the earth. "It's a mirror," Duval whispered during one recording, her voice trembling, "but it's not showing us our world." Her theory was as bold as it was terrifying. The Templars, she claimed, had not simply found a hidden chamber. They had discovered an interface, a boundary between the physical world and something else, something deeper. The heartbeat wasn't a signal from within the earth but from beyond it, a dimensional echo resonating through the planet's core. The temple, then, was not just a building but a seal, a barrier preventing that energy from crossing fully into our realm. If that were true, then the reactivation of the hum, the awakening of the pulse, and the shifting of the stone were not coincidences. Humanity, through centuries of digging, drilling, and interference, had weakened the ancient seal. The light beneath the earth was pushing through, not maliciously, but inevitably. Days later, Duval's notes abruptly stopped. The final entry in her journal read, "The hum is now within us. Our hearts are aligning. Silence is no longer possible." That same night, a strange phenomenon occurred across the globe. People reported hearing the hum inside their chests rather than around them. Hospitals documented thousands of cases of synchronized heart rhythms among unrelated patients. The average global heartbeat, measured across millions of wearable devices, stabilized at exactly 72 beats per minute. Some took it as a sign of unity, a collective resonance between humanity and the earth. Others saw it as the beginning of something irreversible, a merging of the human pulse with that of the buried light. In the early morning hours of the next day, seismic sensors detected one last pulse, deeper, slower, and far more powerful than any before. It was not an explosion, not an earthquake, but a single wave that rippled through the entire planet. And in the ancient silence that followed, the black surface beneath Rennes-le-Château began to glow. Not white this time, but gold. A light that seemed to move like liquid, flowing through the cracks of the stone, spreading outward. No one could say whether it was life, energy, or something divine. But for those who stood near the old church that night, there was no doubt what they felt. It was awakening, and this time the heartbeat was no longer alone. The golden light that seeped through the fissures beneath Rennes-le-Château was unlike anything the world had seen. It did not burn, yet it illuminated. It did not radiate outward, yet it filled the air with warmth. Witnesses later described it as living light, a fluid glow that responded to proximity, pulsing gently when approached, receding when touched. The soldiers stationed near the site reported feeling a strange calm, as though the vibration in the earth had shifted from menace to harmony. For the first time in months, the hum was not unsettling. It was musical. News of the phenomenon leaked despite government efforts to contain it. Footage captured by a local shepherd showed golden veins spreading through the soil like roots of fire, converging beneath the church hill. Within hours, the video went viral before it was deleted from every platform. The official explanation referred to bioluminescent microbial activity, but few believed it. People had already begun to call it the illumination of the earth. Scientists, theologians, and mystics all struggled to define what was happening. Dr. Amir Basra reemerged from hiding, declaring that the energy was not destructive but restorative. "It's the planet recalibrating itself," he said in a clandestine broadcast. "We thought the Templars sealed something dangerous, but what if they sealed something necessary? What if the temple was meant to awaken only when the earth and humanity were ready to receive it again?" His theory ignited fierce debate. Some hailed it as the dawn of a new age of consciousness. Others warned that Basra was misinterpreting an imminent catastrophe. At the same time, ancient texts long thought apocryphal resurfaced in monasteries and private collections. Among them was the Codex Lux Terrae, a Templar manuscript previously dismissed as myth. It spoke of a time when the covenant between the light and the flesh will renew, when the heart beneath shall beat as one with the hearts above. The text suggested that the Templars were not merely guardians of treasure but custodians of a cosmic rhythm, a bridge between the divine pulse of creation and the mortal world. Meanwhile, the light continued to spread. Sensors detected faint golden luminescence appearing in distant parts of the globe, near old Templar fortresses in Portugal, Cyprus, and Scotland. Each site corresponded perfectly with the ley line network mapped in Dr. Armitage's data. It was as though a system dormant for centuries had reawakened in synchrony. Then came the dreams. People across continents, children, monks, scientists, even those skeptical of the Templar legend, began reporting shared visions. They saw a vast chamber beneath the earth, a sphere of light at its center, and 12 figures standing in silence around it. Some described the figures as knights, others as beings made of pure energy, shifting and fluid. In the dream, each person heard the same phrase whispered in an ancient tongue: "The circle is whole again." Psychiatrists attributed it to mass hysteria triggered by global anxiety. Yet as the days passed, those same doctors began to experience the dreams themselves. Governments tried to suppress the reports, but the collective experience could not be hidden. Humanity was dreaming the same dream. In Rennes-le-Château, the golden light grew brighter until it reached the foundations of the old church. The floor began to tremble, not violently, but rhythmically, as though responding to a silent chant. Instruments inside the research compound recorded fluctuations in the electromagnetic field that matched the brainwave frequencies of deep meditation. The earth was thinking. One night, a power outage plunged the entire region into darkness. When backup generators failed, scientists lit candles, only to find that the black surface beneath the church had become translucent. Beneath it, faint shapes moved, like shadows drifting within amber. The heartbeat was louder now, echoing through the walls and bodies of everyone present. Then, slowly, the translucent surface rippled. Witnesses described a shape emerging from within, not breaking through, but phasing upward like light through water. It was a structure, an archway of radiant stone inscribed with symbols that shimmered and shifted as though alive. Beyond the archway, there was no earth, no rock, only vast emptiness filled with soft golden luminescence. For a moment, those who stood closest heard what they later called the voice of the earth. A single tone that carried 1,000 harmonies, resonating not in their ears but within their hearts. Some wept uncontrollably. Others fell to their knees in silence. As the glow intensified, the temperature dropped sharply. Instruments malfunctioned. Clocks stopped again. The archway pulsed once, twice, then emitted a sound so low it was felt rather than heard. And then, from the void beyond it, something stepped forward. It was not human, yet it was not alien. Its shape shifted like liquid glass, forming vague human contours but never solidifying. Where its eyes would have been, 2 points of pure white light burned. It raised one hand, and the heartbeat stopped. For a few seconds the world was utterly still. When sound returned, it came in the form of a whisper that filled every frequency band across the planet, from radio static to the rush of wind in trees. The same message repeated in hundreds of languages. We have always been here. Around the world, people froze. Some knelt, others screamed. The message lasted exactly 9 seconds, then faded, leaving only the faint hum of the earth once more. The scientific community erupted into chaos. Governments called emergency summits. Was it a hoax, a natural resonance, or a global hallucination? Yet the data was incontrovertible. The transmission originated from beneath Rennes-le-Château, and every receiver, every piece of technology capable of processing a signal, had captured it. As panic spread, a strange calm settled over those who had experienced the visions most vividly. They claimed that the figure in the light, was not a threat but a messenger. According to them, the Templars had not hidden a weapon or a god but a conduit, a point of communion between the planet's consciousness and humanity's. The temple was not a prison but a bridge, built to preserve balance until humankind was mature enough to hear the Earth's voice again. Dr. Basra called it the planetary awakening, but others, more cautious, recalled another passage from the Codex Lux Terrae. When the silence breaks and the circle sings, the light will test the hearts of men. The following days brought inexplicable phenomena. Oceans shimmered faintly at night. Trees in ancient forests glowed softly under moonlight. People claimed to hear harmonic tones emanating from mountains, deserts, even the depths of cities. The earth itself seemed to be singing, but not everyone found peace in it. Some regions reported mass disorientation, hallucinations, and an overwhelming sense of déjà vu. Others described time slipping, seconds repeating, moments vanishing. Temporal measurements became erratic near the Rennes site, as though reality itself was bending under the strain of something emerging from beyond it. In the midst of this chaos, one message began circulating anonymously across encrypted networks, a recording of Dr. Celine Armitage's voice. She sounded calm, resolute, and almost sorrowful. The light beneath the earth was never meant to destroy, she said. Its memory, the memory of creation itself. The Templars found a way to contain it so that humanity could grow freely, without the burden of its awareness. But now that the seal is broken, the earth remembers us again. We are part of its mind, and it is waking up. Then, after a brief pause, she added, "But memory is not always merciful." The recording ended there, and as dawn broke over Rennes-le-Château, the golden light beneath the ground flared brighter than ever before, reaching through soil and stone until it crowned the hill like a rising sun. The heartbeat resumed, steady and unstoppable. The earth was no longer whispering. It was calling. The morning the golden crown of light appeared over Rennes-le-Château, nothing felt like the same world anymore. Birds flew in perfect spirals across the pale sky. The air carried a charge, not the sting of electricity, but a softness that pressed against the skin, as if the atmosphere itself was aware. From satellites orbiting above, The light looked like a vast aureole rising from the heart of southern France, visible even in daylight, faint yet undeniable. The event was broadcast briefly before the feeds cut out worldwide. What followed was silence. And then, an hour later, the hum began again, deeper and more powerful than ever. This was not the hum of old, the low tremor that vibrated like a buried machine. This was symphonic. A chorus of frequencies, interwoven and rhythmic, rising and falling like breath. Instruments all over the world began to record it automatically. The pitch shifted according to latitude, forming an impossible global harmony. Some called it the chant of the earth. To others, it was the Templar song. But to those who had seen the being step through the archway the night before, it was something else entirely, the sound of awakening. Within 24 hours, the effects were global. Magnetic fields realigned, creating vast auroral streams that flowed like golden ribbons even across tropical skies. Ancient temples and monuments began to resonate at matching frequencies. In Jerusalem, the Wailing Wall trembled faintly. In Giza, the air above the Great Pyramid shimmered as though under heat distortion. Sensors at Stonehenge recorded vibrations identical to those measured at Ren. It was as if the Earth's sacred architecture, old, forgotten, scattered, had reconnected. In response, governments declared global emergency protocols. Satellites were redirected to monitor atmospheric anomalies. But the data they captured only deepened the mystery. Every 42 minutes, a pulse, identical in pattern to a human heartbeat, rippled outward from Rennes-le-Château, circling the planet like a silent beacon. It was not destructive, but it interfered with all digital systems. Power grids flickered, compasses wavered, and GPS systems began to drift. The planet itself had become a transmitter, broadcasting on a frequency no one understood. Meanwhile, strange physiological effects began manifesting among the population. People reported feeling synchronized heartbeats during the pulses. Hospitals documented cases of spontaneous cardiac alignment, entire wards of patients whose pulses matched the 72-beat rhythm precisely, regardless of age or condition. Some who had been unconscious awoke briefly during the surges, whispering in unknown languages or repeating fragments of Latin prayers. Lux terrae minae, one man kept murmuring before falling silent again. The light of the earth remains. Religious institutions struggled to interpret what was unfolding. The Vatican released a cautious statement referring to a moment of great mystery and urged calm. But privately, documents leaked revealing that several senior cardinals believed the event matched prophecies long sealed within the archives of Avignon. Texts allegedly penned by a Templar scribe foreseeing a reunion of the flesh and the light centuries after the order's fall. In those writings, the awakening was called Resonantia Mundi, the resonance of the world. As the pulse intensified, seismic instruments began detecting deep patterns within the Earth's crust. Not random vibrations but symmetrical formations, like the petals of a colossal flower. Each pulse caused the petals to expand slightly, releasing low tremors felt across multiple continents. To scientists, this suggested that the energy was being distributed evenly through tectonic plates, not damaging them but rebalancing them. The planet, they concluded, was entering a phase of harmonic equilibrium. Yet for every moment of beauty, there was unease. Balance demanded correction, and no one knew what the cost would be. At Rennes-le-Château, the light had solidified into an enormous dome of translucent gold spanning the hilltop. It pulsed with the global heartbeat, casting shadows that shifted with uncanny precision. Years drifted by, and Rennes-le-Château became a place of quiet pilgrimage. No longer a site for scientists or treasure hunters, it turned into something subtler. A sanctuary for those seeking silence, understanding, or simply the feeling of standing upon ancient ground that had once glowed with the memory of the earth itself. The once broken church was rebuilt, not by order of any faith, but by volunteers from many. Priests, monks, atheists, scholars, even children. They rebuilt it stone by stone, guided not by blueprints but intuition, following the geometry of light and proportion that the Templars had once mastered. When finished, its windows caught the sunrise perfectly, casting golden rays across the altar in the same shape as the Templar seal. Visitors who entered often described feeling warmth, not from temperature but from within, as if the air held something benevolent. A few claimed that in moments of deep stillness, they could hear faint chanting rising from the ground below, harmonic, ancient, and beautiful. Scientists who recorded the sound found nothing. The audio came back as silence. Yet those who stood there swore they felt the vibration in their bones. "It's not a sound," one pilgrim said softly. "It's a memory that sings." Dr. Elise Carpentier passed away on a spring morning, her journals beside her bed, her window open to the southern wind. In her final entry, written in a shaky but peaceful hand, she left a single line: "The temple never sleeps. It lives wherever hearts remember." When her ashes were scattered across the hill, the wind rose suddenly, swirling in a spiral that shimmered faintly in the sun. For a moment, those gathered swore they heard the faint echo of that long-vanished hum, low, warm, alive, as if the earth itself whispered its gratitude before falling silent again. Centuries will pass, and the story of the Lost Templar Temple will blur into the fabric of myth. Historians will debate its truth, theologians will dissect its meaning, and skeptics will dismiss it as a collective delusion born of faith and coincidence. Yet, beneath those arguments, the earth will keep its quiet rhythm, pulsing in the hidden frequency that no instrument can measure. Somewhere beneath the old stones of Rennes-le-Château, that ancient chamber still lies undisturbed. The altar, the 12 pillars, the inscriptions glowing faintly beneath the layers of time. The hum has faded from human hearing, but not from the bones of the planet itself. There will always be those who return, wanderers, dreamers, scholars who follow a whisper rather than a map. They come with questions about God, about memory, about the invisible forces that bind humanity to the soil. Most find nothing but silence. Yet sometimes, in the breathless pause between wind gusts, they feel a tremor underfoot, a single note like the pluck of a string. And in that instant, some part of them remembers. A warmth in the chest, an inexplicable peace, as if the earth were greeting an old friend. They leave changed, though they cannot say why. The legend will say the Templars guarded treasure. Others will claim they protected a secret of power. But those who have stood on that hill know the truth was never gold nor knowledge. It was harmony. The understanding that everything, stone, blood, light, and time, sings the same song, waiting for mankind to hear it again. And perhaps that is what the Templars sought to preserve. Not domination, not salvation, but remembrance. A reminder whispered through centuries. The light sleeps only in forgetfulness, and wakes when we remember. Long after the last pilgrim has gone and the stories have settled into legend, the land itself holds the memory. The hills of Rennes-le-Château are quiet now, covered in wild thyme and lavender, their scent drifting across the ruins at dusk. Shepherds lead their flocks along the same paths once walked by knights, monks, and seekers of truth. The rebuilt church stands in stillness, its bells rarely rung, its doors always open. At night, when the moon rises full, a pale shimmer moves through the valley, a faint radiance that no one can explain but all can feel. It's as if the earth breathes light in its sleep, exhaling the last whispers of the Templars' forgotten prayer. Inside the church, beneath the worn altar, a small plaque bears a simple inscription carved by unknown hands: Lux terrae mene, the light of the earth remains. Visitors often overlook it, thinking it a decorative remnant, but those who pause long enough sense something deeper. The air feels different there, softer, heavier with meaning. Sometimes, when a beam of sunlight strikes that spot, it reflects upward in a column of gold, faint but unwavering, and for a fleeting moment, the soundless hum returns, echoing faintly in the ribs of the building. The villagers say it's just the wind through the old stones. The scientists call it resonance, a trick of acoustics. But for those who have heard the stories of the Golden Dome, of the awakening beneath the earth, it is a quiet reassurance that the temple's light was never lost. It simply changed form. It moved into the soil, into the wind, into every heartbeat that listens for something greater. The temple endures, unseen, alive, within the pulse of the world itself. And so, the story closes where it began, beneath the same sky, over the same quiet hills, where centuries of faith, greed, and wonder converged. The Templars are dust, their names worn thin by time, yet what they carried endures in the spaces between silence and sound. The earth remembers them, not as warriors or heretics, but as keepers of a light too vast for their age. Perhaps one day, when humanity learns again to listen rather than conquer, that light will rise once more, not from the ground, but from within every human heart that dares to remember.